If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
For those into urban exploration, exploring abandoned places, asylums, or haunted locations, what was your scariest encounter with the paranormal or something creepy?
Back in 2009, 4 friends and I were walking home from a basketball game in a suburb that is near our neighborhood. It was around 8 p.m., and it was pretty dark. There were 2 ways to go into my neighborhood. The first one was the shortcut, which consisted of cutting through the middle of an abandoned paintball park in an open field, and it will take around 10 minutes to arrive at our homes. Second was the long way, which takes 25 to 30 minutes walking in a bright area surrounded by houses and endless illuminated roads that finished right on the entrance of the abandoned park, and then 5 minutes of walking in semi-illuminated areas. We took the shortcut like we did every time, but this time everything was quiet, no animal sound, abandoned dogs took shelter there, no car sound from far, just pure silence. One of my friends decides to start talking about how it must be cool to play Ouija in the middle of the field as a joke. We told him to shut up collectively because we were pretty scared. We all see the entrance of the park, and we all start getting less stressed and start talking again. We were about 100 feet from the entrance when we all heard and felt stomps coming from behind us, but not regular stomps but heavy stomps like an elephant or bull running. We looked back, and there was this strange shaped creature with really dim red eyes. At first, it looked completely dark, but as it got closer, it was grayish and charging towards us. We collectively looked at each other, and we ran as fast as possible towards the entrance and managed to get out. While walking, there is a part of the street that briefly overlooks the field, and we all looked to see it. We could see anything, but all we saw was dim red dots looking directly at us. We all went home, and the next day we tried to figure out what happened. 4 out of 5 of us can confirm this story. Sadly, one of my friends passed away a couple of years ago. I also moved but have to travel every weekend through that area to visit my family. It still gives me the creeps going through there at night. A weird experience in Scotland. I felt crazy for, 23 years. Okay, so when I was about 5, we would visit the same caravan park in Scotland every weekend. It was a second home, and I was able to freely play on this quiet, slightly rundown but otherwise familiar caravan park. This was the 90s. My favorite place was playing in the heather. I've always been a very short girl. So at 5, the heather to me seemed so tall and was great to run through and hide. There was a path I'd take from just near my own caravan. If you went so far, it would pop out into a clearing, and then you could walk up this long abandoned road to the old hospital, where we would all, as kids, dare each other to go in. The caravan park was a former base during the war, with pillbox gun shelters scattered all over the site. I digress. This day I was in the heather, when I heard an unearthly loud breathing right beside me. I looked through the heather branches and saw nothing, but I could still hear it, and it felt and sounded like it was looking right at me. I started to run back in the direction of the caravans, and it followed me, keeping pace, breathing louder. It wasn't animal-like, it wasn't human, but somewhere in between. I stopped. It stopped moving. I ran as fast as I could again keeping up pace. It was following me, and its breathing never changed. But I never saw it once. I popped out the heather back out onto the road. I stopped and looked back. It never came out. I could still hear it. It sounded like it was just on the edge of the vast sea of heather still looking at me. I freaked the hell out and ran straight back to the caravan, where I hysterically tried to tell my mom. Who, of course. She told me it was my imagination and to go back out. To this day, as a 29-year-old woman, I stand by it. I know what I heard. I know what I felt. But I'll never know what it was. I've been a skeptic even though I have always enjoyed horror movies and ghost stories. I also enjoy exploring abandoned places, and I've been in several abandoned hospitals and so-called haunted places at night. Nothing happened until I visited one abandoned mental hospital. There's also one event from my childhood. I was a kid when my grandmother died. I was close with her, and there was always a certain scent at her home, like hand cream or some other cosmetic product. Just after her death, I was home alone and remember smelling the exact same scent. I followed the scent to another room, and suddenly it was gone. Afterwards, I've been thinking, what if she visited me the last time? However, that thing happened so long ago that now I'm thinking it was just a child's imagination or false memory. It's weird since I still remember it pretty clearly. The more frightening event happened recently. Me and my friend were walking outside an abandoned mental hospital. It was summer night, and there wasn't any fog anywhere. I was keeping my flashlight on low mode to preserve battery. Suddenly some white figure appears in my flashlight beam. I panic, put the flashlight on maximum brightness, and then the figure is gone. For a brief second, it looked like a woman in an old-fashioned dress walked in front of us. I think I even saw the legs moving. My friend was looking in another direction but also saw something white out of the corner of his eye. As I said, there was no visible fog anywhere near us. We tried to demonstrate if the flashlight beam was reflected from somewhere but couldn't reproduce the white figure. I stayed at my friend's summer cottage that night and was pretty scared when I had to go out and pee. I kept my flashlight on and looked around constantly, just to make sure nothing was lurking nearby. Now I would say that in my opinion it's a 50-50 chance that ghosts are real. I still believe there might be a logical explanation for both of these events. The white figure is still unexplained though. What do you think? I just wanted to discuss these events. My fiancé and I have had a strange experience with an abandoned house. So, my fiancé and I live in a very rural, small town in central Virginia, surrounded by towns and counties that are very similar to ours. There aren't many things to do here, so we typically drive around just to get out of the house for a bit. 3 nights ago, we were driving through a surrounding county on an extremely backwoods road, very few houses, no other people out, pretty much dead, and we got to a stop sign and needed to make a right turn. Straight across from us was an old house. The windows were boarded up, it was decaying somewhat, and it looked as if no one had lived there for a long time. We both, almost in sync, just stopped what we were doing mid-conversation/turn and looked at this house. The door was slightly cracked open, it was pitch black outside, the sky was very cloudy, so no stars or moon, and the nearest house was a few miles behind us, and I felt this horrible, heavy feeling of dread come over me. I thought it was just because we were alone out in the middle of nowhere with a scary looking house, but my fiancé and I just kept sitting there, looking at this house. He made the turn a few moments later. We had probably sat there for 3 to 4 minutes at this point, and he told me that he had never felt the way that house made him feel. I scare very easily, so coming from me it isn't worrisome, but he's the opposite. Now, for the past 3 days, we cannot let go of this house. I think about it and the feeling it gave me constantly. I try to push it out of my mind, but we both started dreaming about it. Disturbed something in an old cemetery? I've developed an admittedly odd hobby of scouring old offline maps, weird entries, and local history books to locate forgotten or abandoned cemeteries in the county that I live in. When I'm lucky enough to find one, I'll go out to it, take photos, and add the place on maps so it doesn't get lost again. Too morbid for many, but for me it's a good enough reason to go out and have an outdoor adventure with my kid. Earlier this year I visited a pioneer cemetery dating back to the mid-1850s, as most of them in this part of Texas do. I went out, took my pictures, and I left. I was the only one there. It was small, with only one family buried in it. Some research indicated that the family patriarch founded the first ever pharmacy in town. No weird feelings, no seeing ghosts, nothing like that. Just a peaceful, short visit. As I was trying to fall asleep that night and thinking about the day's activities, my thoughts went to the cemetery. Then to a little bench that I remembered from the middle of the cemetery. Then to a man sitting on the bench, a man with no face. In my memory, this man was sitting there facing me, dressed in old-timey dark clothes and wearing a dark top hat. He was tall and thin. White guy, tanned. When I tried to picture his face, all I could see was a blank slate. No features, just flat. Like if you erased the eyes, ears, and mouth from a portrait. Still a head there with hair and a hat, but nothing else. This memory was accompanied by a very strong feeling of presence? Like more than just a hollow memory. The only other time I felt this way was on the evening of my grandfather's funeral. That night I dreamed that my grandfather came by to say goodbye to me. He didn't say anything that I remember, instead, he just smiled at me and hung out in my dream for a while. The memory of this weird old guy on the bench in that cemetery felt just like this dream of my granddad. That was weird, I thought to myself. I figured I was imagining things. I was still wide awake at this point, so I tried my hardest to forget about it and go to sleep. I didn't think about it again until the next day, when I was walking down the stairs of my house into my living room. When I glanced briefly at my fireplace, I was struck by that same feeling, the one of the old guy's presence from my dream. This time it was also accompanied by what felt like strong curiosity. The feeling lasted for around 30 seconds, then was gone as fast as it had come. It's never returned. I either imagined all of it, or I was followed home by an old man's spirit who was curious about me. It's likely the former, but the possibility of it being the latter gnaws at me. I'm still on the hunt for forgotten cemeteries, and hopefully I'm alone in my memories of the next ones I visit. Apparitions in an abandoned asylum. My brother and I do a little bit of urban exploring, and one of our favorite haunts, pardon the pun, is a massive, sprawling former asylum in upstate New York. It's easy enough to get to because they converted the land into a state park and let the buildings crumble, and most of them aren't even boarded up. We've been there almost too many times to count now, but my first time there, his second, was in the winter of 2017. We went at night because the local police will still patrol the area for trespassers, and we made our way to the biggest building on the campus, the hospital/ward/morgue. It's kind of shaped like a large U, with a courtyard that opens up to the front driveway and two large wings enclosing it. We entered through a door on the side and saw old dental supplies, some rotting patient scrubs, beer cans, etc., and got the snot scared out of us when a raccoon darted out of the elevator shaft. When we finished exploring the hospital, I refused to continue walking through the hallways because I was terrified and wanted to leave. We exited the same door we came out of and walked along the long arm of the building to go to the former children's dormitories. Keep in mind that the roof of the hospital, from where we were, was about 45 to 50 feet high. It was a big building. My brother heard some shuffling from the roof and froze before he quietly pointed up to the top. I followed where he was looking, and I saw a massive pitch black shape shuffling around on the roof. It moved similar to how a raccoon moved and had a similar rounded shape, but from where we were it looked like it was about 5 to 6 times the size, like as big as a Rottweiler. I froze too, and when the shape shuffled out of view, we darted around the building to a pavilion because we were both scared shitless. We looked back at the hospital, and even though it was a clear night with a full moon, we couldn't see the shape on the roof anymore. We eventually got over it and moved on to some of the other buildings. The last one we visited was the female staff dormitories, located near the asylum's huge power plant with a big smokestack nearby setting the mood. We climbed in a first-floor window and made our way to the spiral staircase in the west of the building. We decided to try to explore from the top down, so we went up to the 4th floor. I was still on edge from earlier, so I made my brother open the door. He had to slam his shoulder into it because it wouldn't open, to be expected when it hasn't been oiled in some 20-odd years, and the resulting extremely loud bang made me whisper loudly, "Okay, I'm done. Let's get out of here." He responded, "Not yet, just give it one more chance." Not even a beat after he finished saying that, we heard a second, equally loud door slam from somewhere down the hall. We both turned tail and bolted straight out of the building and ran the 3/4 mile back to the car. We've gone back a few times, but nothing has scared us quite like that early visit. That place, Lechworth Village, also apparently has an apparition called the Tall Man, a black silhouette that will sometimes cut car battery lines so people can't escape. That one I'm not so sure about, but I know I don't have any good explanation for the stuff we saw that night. Creepy experience at an abandoned turnpike tunnel in the middle of the woods. So me and my 2 friends decided to go to Tunnel 2, which is like the shortest walk, but that is because you have to park in the middle of literally nowhere and walk through a pretty dense wood line. We get out of our car and start to walk up the path to the tunnel, and my friend, we'll call him N, has this huge and high power spotlight, which I was using because he was checking out my little tack flashlight. N's spotlight can reach like half a mile, that's crazy, so I decided to flash it back toward my other friend's car. I see these 2 eyes in the woods behind the car, like halfway up this tree. My friend's like, "Wow, that's pretty high," so we decide to head back towards it and check it out. We don't see the eyes, so we assume it was an animal or something, and it ran off. My friend has my light and says, "Yo, it's over here now." It came close to us. It was 100% humanoid head, we even saw the arms. So our at this point gets sketchy as hell and goes, "Let's get back to the car." We are at this point, like 100 years from the car. We get to the break of the dense wood path, prob 75 yards from the car, and I see the eyes again with the spotlight even closer to us. It keeps getting close and it way up this tree, 7-ish feet, it assume. At this point we all have our knives out because we are scared shitless. Our goes, we gotta get to our car, but it's right there on the other side of the road. We get to the metal rebar blockade type thing that blocks the path so no one can drive their cars through the tunnels, and we don't see the eyes. We stop and are like scanning the woodline on the other side of the road, and I see to our left an eye peeking at us, and it darts back behind the tree and repeats, and I see a 100% humanoid head and arm, and it darts back behind the tree. At this point, we book it for the car. We get in the car, and N winds down the back window and starts scanning with his light. We see it like 20 years from the car, we see its head, its arm, and its foot, and it again rehides behind the tree. R is in a full panic because it keeps getting closer, so he floored it out of there. N vouches it was a Bigfoot. R to this day says he has no idea what it was and he doesn't want to think about it. Honestly, I want to say it was a Bigfoot, but I'm so skeptical with that kind of stuff. I genuinely do not know what it was. It was 7 to 8 feet tall and kept getting closer to us. It was not an owl and was not a bear. And it was not a human because human eyes do not refract light like this did, so it wasn't a human. And refuses to even go back to tunnel 2, he's that scared. Probably one of the most terrifying moments of my life. The thing is, it wasn't even that scary, but we were all talking on the drive home about how we all felt like dread/horror even as we pulled up to the trail before we even saw the eyes. We all agreed we've never had such a strange feeling in our entire lives. Like an immediate, insurmountable dread right as we got out of the car. It also wasn't a good idea that we decided to go at like 2 a.m. Abandoned car. My roommate and I are urban explorers and enjoy going into abandoned old buildings to look at architecture and history. We also enjoy the tags people put up. We heard from a friend that there was an abandoned home for the feeble-minded, as they called it outside, in the suburbs of the city. Granted, we should have known something creepy was going to happen, but we wanted to check it out. After a 45-minute drive, we got to the area where it is located. The land had been turned into a state park so no one could build on it and was flat all around for miles. There was one farm maybe 3 miles up the road that we passed, but that was the only civilization around. We started to drive past what was known as the baby cemetery. I kid you not. This is where they buried the babies that didn't survive, and there were suspicions that the doctors of the facility would impregnate cognitively delayed patients and kill the infants that resulted from it. Anyway, we see a broken down car up ahead with its hood opened. We slow down to pass it, and there is a woman with brown hair in the front seat staring at her lap. She looked young, and she was all by herself in this creepy area. We had driven past her and debated whether we should stop checking on her. After about 30 seconds, we said, "Duck it, she is probably just as scared as us." I whipped a shitty and drove back to her car and started to slow down. But when we got to the car, it was empty and the hood was down. It even looked like it had aged since the last time we saw it. The interior was falling apart, and there were shreds of the ceiling hanging down. The tires were even flat. We started to panic and drove away as fast as we could. If another car had come, we would have seen it. We only took all of 30 seconds to turn around, and you could see for miles as it was so flat. The only option was that she went into the cemetery on her own or started to walk, but we would have seen her. We have no idea what she wanted or what would have happened if we stopped the first time. Needless to say, we didn't do much exploring that night. My friends broke into our old high school at 3 a.m. and saw a black figure watching them in a classroom. On Tuesday, my best friend, S, and her 2 roommates, T and J, were talking about our old high school 2 days ago. Our school was buried on top of a burial ground, and several students who have gone to school there have passed away tragically, unrelated to the school. Well, they decided to break in at 3 a.m. to explore what the school was like now. We are 20, so we graduated only 2 years ago. J was scared and did not want to go inside, so she stayed in my friend's car in the driver's seat in case they all needed to leave. So S and her other roommate T decided to jump the gate and explore. They thought the energy seemed kind of scary, but they were curious and kept walking. They reached this one classroom in the back, and that's when my friend looked inside. She said the lights in all the hallways were red. I think it's just a feature they added. When she looked into the classroom, she saw a black silhouette of a person in the classroom close to the door. She said that even though she couldn't make out a face, she felt that it was watching them. She grabbed T and told her calmly that they needed to leave because someone was there. They sprinted back to the car, and they all left. They then went to our old middle school to see what it looked like now. They couldn't get in because the gates were locked, so J asks S if she wants to get back into the driver's seat since it's her car, and S declines. So J pulls out and leaves. It's about 3:33:45 a.m. at this point. As she pulls out and starts driving back to their apartment, they see these 2 white blinding lights coming towards them. They couldn't tell if it was a car since the lights were so bright. 2 seconds later, they realized it was a wrong-way driver coming at them at about 80 miles an hour, and Jay was able to swerve around at last second as the car just zoomed straight past them without realizing. Luckily, they saw cops pulled over on the side of the road ahead. They told the cops, and they immediately dispatched someone to go follow the car. They were silent for the rest of the night because of how terrifying the experience was. The scary part is that, last week, a girl who just graduated from our high school was driving up to Maryland for Thanksgiving with her parents to visit her brother, who happened to be in our grade, and they swerved into the southbound lane and died in a head-on collision. S was telling her roommates about it right before they left the middle school and almost died. She is 100% sure she saw a person at the school but isn't sure if it was a real person or something else. Our school doesn't have late security or cleaners. And I'm not sure why, but when she told me the story, I felt a strong gut feeling that it was something else. The night just felt too perfectly lined up. I believe that humans are scarier than anything paranormal, but my gut just tells me she encountered something else. If anyone could give any input at all, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Creepy sighting at an abandoned asylum. In the dorm my freshman year of college, I met a guy that lived close to Athens, Ohio. We were both free thinkers / pot smokers and became swift friends. During our fall break, 3-day weekend, he took me home to party with his high school friends. On one of our little excursions, he became really excited about visiting an old insane asylum called the Ridges. The place sat on a large hill, and driving up to the old building was a creepy experience in itself. The main, front building was still operational as a museum, so there were other cars there, but we arrived right before closing. We didn't park in front but drove around the right side of the large building. There were other, smaller buildings on the grounds that we drove among and inspected. At the small cemetery, we got out and walked around. We were generally just enjoying the silent, reverent atmosphere and not really feeling or expecting anything creepy. We walked around a bit more. Anyone been there? I think the Ohio University has a high ropes course nearby. Anyway, about an hour later, we had smoked more, climbed around on some wooden contraptions, and then decided to go get something to eat. The car was where we left it by the cemetery, and we headed off around the building in the same direction we had come in, with the idea that we would just circle it and head out. At the back of the building, there was an asphalt courtyard of sorts. It could have served as parking or a loading area. We pulled in about halfway, realized that it was a dead end, and began to turn around. It was then that I noticed something written on one of the windows on the 3rd floor. I could not easily read it, so I stopped the car, and we got out. The writing stretched across the window's width, yet it remained unintelligible. Some of the letters looked familiar, there were what appeared to be 2 M's and an I, but it took us a minute. Then it hit me. It was written from inside the window, so it appeared backwards to us. It was a name, Timmy. And just as I figured it out and said it out loud, an adult-sized figure dressed completely in gray came to the window, then backed away slowly. We both saw it, our jaws hitting the pavement. "What the?" I said with a look on my face that I can only describe as pissed off, not bad. We immediately got in the car, had a quick WTF laugh about it, then went to Burger King. I've seen some other creepy things here and there, but that one takes the cake. Thanks for listening. Abandoned house story. I was 10 years old. Back then, my friends and I would ride our bikes as far as we could, looking for adventure or to discover something new and exciting. At this time, my community was a mix of new and old, and it was simple to find an old tunnel, the remains of a farmhouse, or decayed paths and trails. We set out that summer day with one extra boy than the usual crew. I had not formally met him yet. Nonetheless, we headed out on our bikes. We came across an abandoned house near a farmer's field and forest. We started to explore the premises, and we decided to settle here for a while. We walked in, checked things out, and were just hanging out and sharing our findings. I started to hear the sound of rocks or gravel being moved through water, like slurry, emanating from the basement. I thought it was my friends playing in the house. I briefly ignored this. Suddenly there was wailing, and the sound of gravel was getting louder, like thrashing, like someone was throwing rocks or gravel. Frozen. There was no way my friends could make that noise. Quiet, fast talking surrounded us. My one friend started to cry uncontrollably. His brother, a warrior-type kid, was preparing to protect his brother. Together, we could see inside the house's front hall and stairs. The new boy was giggling and gesturing us to come downstairs by waving us in with his hand. We stood there dumbfounded. How or what? How did he not know the immediate danger we were in, that he was in? I wanted to get him, as I thought this was possibly his last moment on Earth. But I watched him return up from the dark stairwell leading to the basement. He was still giggling and mirroring the exact same motion. He returned again downstairs and out of sight. We shouted at him. But he kept doing the exact same thing over and over again. He was actually speeding up, like 2x then 3x faster. The noises from the basement, I can only describe as pure despair, like an agonizing, painful, and doom-like quality, but they were human, or at least human-like. We screamed at the boy that we were leaving, and it seemed like he was coming outside. Frantic, we just started biking as fast as possible, petrified with fear I couldn't look back. It was dusk now, and we had no time to reconvene. We separated immediately and went home before we were grounded. I asked my friends the next day if anyone saw the other boy. They responded, they thought he was someone else's friend from our group. We didn't even know his name or where he came from, and we never saw him again. Abandoned/haunted buildings. There are two main abandoned buildings in my city, the Hilden Mill and the abandoned offices. The mill had a massive fire, which was tragic seeing as it was a main building in the linen industry, which is what my city is known for. I went there 3 days ago and saw some figures. This freaks me out because there was someone who tragically hung himself in there. It's also supposedly haunted. The thing is, I'm skeptical if the mill is haunted. The abandoned offices seem more haunted to me. I went to the offices at night about 2 months ago and had a terrifying experience. I caught a figure in video, and I heard voices and footsteps in there. I went again with a friend for 10 minutes, then we fled. He saw a figure standing in a room we walked past. Then, finally, we went again during the day to see if it was just the night making us paranoid. It wasn't. We were on the bottom floor, and at the same time we saw two figures. I was looking behind me and saw a figure about 9 feet tall right behind me in a room extremely close to me. He saw a small childlike figure run across the hall at the same time, which is scary as the figure we saw in the room at night was a child. There was also a fire in there, and multiple people apparently died. Then, one last time he and some friends went back at night. I didn't go as I'm a lazy person and was asleep. They apparently heard multiple bangs downstairs, voices/screams, and the childlike figure again. What do you guys think? Do you think I should go back and gather video evidence? Or leave it? Thanks for listening if you did. The Lost Mine. A small town in the mountains known for being built on the idea of riches from mining has had its fair share of different personalities. Some of those souls have moved on, and others have gotten lost. This town had many mining structures and oxidized mountains of minerals, all abandoned. But one name sticks out to me, my friends, and a good amount of others in the town. One mine we call Sarko. This mine is a good 20-minute drive past other abandoned structures and up into the mountains. You get to a main gate that veers off into a dirt road. This takes you to an old tailings pond. A huge field elevated above the ground to hold water when there is a lot of excess water. Across the field are multiple abandoned structures that sit lonely. Right next to the inlet of the water. Me and my friend have never been out there, but we have always heard of it. We ventured out to see it and also look for paranormal experiences. As we drive in, there's a herd of deer watching our every move as we get ready to sneak our way over. We start walking down a hill that then had us jump over a river, then a steep hill to get into the flat field that once was a tailings pond. We get to the top and right away notice that the moon is lighting up a lot of our surroundings. We could see a shadow cast of the mountain behind the buildings. So, in other words, a dark side and a bright side. The walk was 2 football fields away from the start of the field. As we walked over, we watched the floor to watch our step. We walked what felt like 50 yards when my friend told me, "Hold up, we're already here." This spooked us out because it felt like we had teleported right to the base in a matter of a few steps. It was as if once we stepped into the shadow, the distance of walking was extremely tampered with and felt unreal. We were looking to communicate with spirits and would hear taps on the building that would be a response to our questions. After that, we weren't experiencing too much paranormal, so we decided to leave. As we were walking out back to the steep and long slope, I started to hear an extra footstep behind us. It was almost as if we were being followed out or even escorted. I told my friend, and he heard it too. In my mind, I wanted to debunk it and see if it was all imagination, so I stopped on a dot, and sure enough, right behind us, one extra footstep as soon as I stopped. We looked at each other in shock, and I told my friend, let's stay calm and just walk out normally. Once we started climbing down the steep hill, it felt as if the presence of something had just left us. And as we were leaving in the car, the same deer herd watched us drive out, and a little farther down, one deer jumped in front of the car like one last go away from the spirits. Haunted abandoned mall. I heard voices screaming in the slide. So I live in the country, northern Texas, and go to this basically abandoned mall, except for 3 stores still open. One of the stores still open is an indoor playground for toddlers and kids. Well, you never would suspect anything haunting a playground, right? Well, I wouldn't either, but this really happened to me, a few days ago. So I brought my toddler to play in this indoor playground, the kind that has slides, jump houses, arcade games kind of place. We were the only ones in the store. We were going through this maze and going up this slide, and all of a sudden, I hear 2 ladies yelling loudly in the slide. It sounded like a really loud argument, so loud I took my babies out of the slide. I then investigated around, and sometime this week, I will bring my husband there and have him see for himself. He is super skeptical and doesn't believe in this stuff, so I'll give an update soon. In my hometown in South Texas, there is a hospital that is abandoned. It has an extremely demonic presence. I have had friends who have gone inside and ventured down to the basement. There they have heard growling and seen glowing red eyes. That was 8 to 9 years ago. My little brother, who is 17, has had friends go into the basement there and encounter the same thing. Including the stairs that leave the basement be in an entirely different spot than when they entered. At night, if you get close, it feels like your heart is being clenched tightly. It's hard to catch your breath as if something is sucking the air out of your lungs. The feeling of despair and panic just engulfs you. You just feel the need to get away from there as soon as possible. And that's just coming into the parking lot at night after around 8 p.m. I haven't ventured inside, but the feelings I described are what I've felt along with my wife. The presence is intense and extremely powerful. My wife is somewhat of an oculist. She saw an old lady shift and take the form of a young child dragging a dirty, ragged teddy bear and a murderous smile with black eyes. I have deemed the building and property a no-go zone after sundown. True story whilst abandoned exploring. Back in 2018, me and my dad went to explore an abandoned manor house. When we got there, we climbed over a gate whilst looking for the manor. To our right, there was nothing but fields, and to our left was the back of a large manor house with lights on in almost every room and cars parked at the back, a very well lit, clean, beautiful, and clearly lived in home. We snuck past to find the abandoned manor, thinking it must be up ahead, but to no avail, so we crept back the same way and back over the gate out of luck. As we walked down the road, a couple of seconds later we noticed the front of the abandoned manor we were looking for and proceeded to explore. After exploring a clearly abandoned old derelict building, we then realized coming out the back and down the lane that the same gate we jumped over previously. What we had seen earlier was in fact the same manor. There was nothing left or right of the abandoned manor, at least 4 fields either side. To this day, we know what we saw, and we must have first seen how the manor looked when it was lived in and operational and went round the front, and it was the present day manor, old and abandoned. Weird events and scratches next to an abandoned house. I didn't really know where to turn, especially since I've been a skeptic for a long time. For context, I live in a fairly small village with about 200 people. So the story begins in my childhood when we had neighbors. A family of 5 lived in a house next to ours, an older lady, a married couple, and 2 kids, which I got along with really well. We always used to talk and play through the fence that separated our yards, and everything was fine. From the beginning, I remember how they used to visit us, yet I never wanted to enter their house. I can't name the exact feeling, but I felt somewhat hesitant and just reluctant. Eventually, the older lady passed away, and the remaining family moved to a way bigger city, and that's when the strange stuff started to happen. Next to the fence, my family and I decided to plant some bushes that mysteriously started to wither. We carefully inspected the soil and even bought some fertilizers, but nothing worked. Also, whenever I was playing outside, I always felt watched, and even used to turn around and look at the windows because I was certain that someone from the now abandoned house was looking and inspecting my every move. The really weird and eerie stuff started about 5 years ago when I was sitting with my cousin on a swing, and I suddenly felt like something burned my back. It was so painful I couldn't help but jump up and just scream. After getting it under cold water, my cousin said that the area where I felt the burn was filled with blisters. We then inspected the swing and still couldn't find out what really happened. Next, I was laying on a lawn chair and felt a breeze on my neck, followed by a sudden pain, also on my back. I immediately covered it with my hand and saw drops of blood on my fingers. I quickly ran to my home, only to see 3 marks on my skin, like claws or nails. It wasn't huge, but it was still painful and noticeable. After that, things got only worse. I had terrible experiences with sleeping, where I woke up in the middle of the night, sweaty and absolutely terrified, convinced someone was in the room with me. Also, I found new scratches on my thighs, on my arms, stomach, and shoulders. Miraculously, the property has been bought out by the past lady's other sons. Since they moved in and renovated the home, it all has stopped. The bushes grew, except one, which gives a clear look at our yard. I sleep better than ever, and I don't really feel the way I used to. I don't know what to think of this. I'm sharing my experience in hopes of figuring out what really happened and why it happened. If you have any idea what it could have been, please let me know. In my hometown in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, my friends and I frequently explored an abandoned orphanage. We never really experienced anything scary until one night, in December, if my memory serves me correctly. I was with my boyfriend and another friend of ours. This place is pitch black inside at night, obviously, and even during the daytime, the lower levels are as well. Since it was winter, snow would blow in the broken windows and create ice on the floor and marble staircases, so to mix the slipperiness and darkness, I grabbed onto the back of my boyfriend's jacket as we entered the building and started descending the steps. We went down 3 flights. I saw him when I grabbed onto him. I know it was him. I never let go. I never released my hands, even for a second. I got to the bottom of the stairs, and he headed to the left down the hall, and I stayed holding on. I walked for a few feet, and then, from the opposite direction down the hall behind me, I heard him say, "Where are you going?" At the same time, the friend we were with said something along the lines of, "What are you doing?" My heart sank, and I immediately let go of whomever I was holding on to and ran to my boyfriend. I have no idea what I experienced. It's by far the scariest moment I can remember. Also, if anyone wants to look it up online, it was called the Holy Family Orphanage in Marquette, Michigan. Look at old pictures. It now has been remodeled into apartments. Ghost Bride in a Haunted Church. Several years ago I had an opportunity to help restore a 100-plus-year-old church that has been vacant for roughly 45 years or so. The church is attached to what once was a primary school that had already been restored into office spaces. This was a no-brainer since it was literally a couple of blocks away from my house, under the table, and the responsibilities were incredibly easy. Since the church had been empty for years, we only worked during the day since the electrical system had yet to be installed. But during the days I would work, I'd always see movement in my peripheral vision, but nothing was there when I'd look in that direction. This happened a lot, to the point where I'd become accustomed to it. This all changed a few months later when the building became operational as we converted the church to an event hall designed for any event you'd pay for. Well, after business hours one evening, I get a call from a tenant saying that something was making noise in the basement of the church. Since the power hadn't been installed into the basement at this point, I made sure to grab my brand new charged flashlight and keys to see what was happening. As soon as I got to the basement door, I could hear what sounded like a power tool running. I go in and start making my way through a pitch-black labyrinth of a basement towards the noise. I found the cause of the noise, which was an air compressor. I know they bleed air at times, but I made sure I bled all the air before I left earlier that day and unplugged it. I looked to see if someone plugged it in after me, and it's still unplugged. At this moment my brand new flashlight starts to flicker, and another unplugged power took turns on behind me. When I turned around to shine my fainting light at it, the light went out completely. I haul us out of the basement through complete darkness towards the door. I get out and see the tenant standing at the door with a puzzled look on her face. She asks what was wrong, as I'm out of breath and freaked out. I tell her what happened, and she smirks and says that doesn't surprise her. She has lived in the neighborhood her entire life and tells me that as a child she attended the school and church. She then tells me a story of a woman who held the last wedding in the church before it closed down. It was a sad story because the woman stood up on her wedding day and ultimately committed suicide because of it. After that night in the basement, the paranormal activity happened more and more often. It got to the point where a coworker fell off a ladder. This ladder was always secured, and he'd been up and down it 100 times. When I asked what happened, he said it felt like he was pushed while leaning to paint. There were even times where the movement I had always seen there started to take shape. Instead of a blur, I started to see a person standing there, but nothing when I looked in that direction. What finally pushed me over the edge was the night, I guess you can say I met her. Since events were always held there, I'd always lock up afterwards. After an overnight booking, I ran into the guests as they were leaving. A gentleman asks me if there were any other people in the building that night. I said no, as we make sure the office part of the building is vacant during overnight bookings. He proceeded to tell me that he heard yelling from the basement and footsteps in the balcony. I assured him they were the only ones there and began to lock up the building. As I'm locking the doors, I hear faintly what the gentleman was referencing. I could hear footsteps on the balcony, and I yelled out, "Is anyone still in here?" I did not get an answer, but at this point I am ready to go. What I hated most about locking up was that the light switch was nowhere near the door. So you would have to shut off the lights and then walk about 30 feet to the door in darkness. I shut off the light and immediately sprinted towards the door. As I reach for the door, I hear footsteps behind me and a muffled voice say, "Leave." I didn't stop to see what it was. I made my way to the glass entry doors and to the other side as fast as I could. As I'm locking the door, I see movement inside the church. I look up and see a ghostly or shadow-like figure standing where the altar once was. I quickly looked down to ensure I locked the door, and by the time I looked back up, the shadowy figure was now making its way to the glass doors. I honestly don't remember if I locked the door or not because I immediately got the hell out of there at that point. After that night, I made sure I never entered that building after dark again. Needless to say, I quit shortly thereafter. I've been in the Oklahoma City area all my life, and I love exploring abandoned places. I get a sense of adrenaline when it's pitch black in a building that used to be populated. There's a risk that I love: homeless people, police, old buildings. Anyway, when I was 16, I went to this huge abandoned hotel that was about to be remodeled close to the state capitol with some friends. We were all laughing and having laughs. I was throwing things down the hall in the dark to freak everyone out. Anyway, we all went to this one room, and everyone had a flashlight except for me. Being the dumb teenagers we were, we each took a corner and peed on the floor of the room. Me and this one guy we were with finished last and started to head out into the hall to regroup with all of our friends. As with most hotels, the bathroom is right next to the door, and for some reason he went in. I followed his flashlight into the bathroom, but when I turned the corner, it was completely dark. I thought he might be playing a joke on me, so I looked around, but he wasn't there at all. When I finally left, everybody, including the guy I thought went into the bathroom, was all in the hallway, and nobody knew what I was talking about and said nobody went into the bathroom in that room. Normally when I'm exploring an abandoned building, I feel nervous and have a sense of dread, but with this place, even after the encounter, I got nothing but good vibes and was really happy. I've had a few paranormal experiences, but this one was the craziest for me. Abandoned house in the journal of a child. Around 2 or 3 years ago, my friends and I had discovered a local abandoned house. Weeds around it were overgrown, and it was all seemingly deserted. They had told me they had been here before, and so I was prepared. The inside was rather small, not much to look at, nothing really. But the kids' room, wow! There were toys, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and even a broken old PlayStation on the floor. We also found a journal. I swear there were 2 when we got there, but I've only been able to find 1 since. Nothing scary at all in the journal either, just stupid kid stuff with some drawings. We left that place with no problem. Skip forward a year or 2. I decided to stop by again with a completely different friend who hadn't been there before. Being a ballsy dumb 16-year-old, I decided to take the journal back home with me, as well as a picture of the kid. As we were walking back away from the house, we heard something, like a metal clang. We tried to ignore it, and when I returned home, I put a Bible on top of the journal, just to be safe. That summer, I decided to take the journal back with a few friends of mine. It was a nice day outside, and my parents were off at work. What happened next was what really got to me. The wind picked up, and clouds darkened the sky. In a few minutes, the wind got so powerful, pushing us in the complete opposite direction of our destination. We had to yell at each other to return. When we got back, the wind had calmed down, but my backyard was wide open, and my dog was running around the front yard. We got him back in the backyard and went inside, only to find the power had gone out. We all joked around about it, and maybe it was all just a really big coincidence. I don't know. Around November, I went back there again, with one friend who had gone with me earlier and 2 friends whose faith would be strong enough to help out. Stupid, yes, but I was too terrified to care. We went around 8 on a Friday night, I believe it was. It was so dark outside. Once we finally got there, I didn't even enter the room. I tossed the journal into the room and called out, "I'm sorry." While we walked out, I heard the same sound I heard years ago. Once again, we all attempted to rationalize the situation. I haven't been back since, and I don't plan to. The weird abandoned house. Demonic activity. This happened a few years ago, so excuse me if the details are a little blurry. I was close friends with this one girl, I'm going to call her A. It was July, and we were hanging out. A told me about this really creepy house down the road from her place. At this point we had been exploring abandoned houses most of the summer, and she had never told me about this one before. I asked A about the house, and she shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She told me how a few months ago she and her other friend went into the house. Nothing seemed weird or out of place. But she told me, as they stood in what was left of the living room, they heard a deep growl come from all around them. Not just behind them or above them, but the sound surrounded them. They sprinted out and went home, not really ever talking about it. Me being dumb, it piqued my interest. We had been to a handful of houses before, and nothing really ever happened. So I convinced A to take me to this house. She kind of laughed a little. She agreed to take me, as long as we get baked beforehand. Sure, okay, I'm not 100% sure that's going to help, but okay. So she packed a bowl, did her thing, and we were off. It was a 15-minute walk from her place, and you couldn't really see the house from the street. It was surrounded by trees and high grass. We found a little path into the house. It was only maybe 20 feet from the street. We walked around the property. There wasn't a bird to be seen or heard. There was just absolutely no wildlife around this house. We walked around and found a jar of nails, a jar of pea and rusty nails, an altar of some sort with 2 chairs in front of it. There was a little shed-like thing 10 feet from the house with a copper wire leading to the attic of the house. We found too many mounds of dirt that had grass growing on top of them. They kind of looked like graves. Altogether, it's pretty weird, and I'm uncomfortable. This place feels weird, and we haven't even gone inside this little cottage yet. Around the side of the house lay a homemade ladder on the ground, and it had been there a while. We finally made our way to the front door and made our way in. The place was half burned up, with huge holes in the ceiling. To your left was shelving, and to your right was the living room. It had 2 couches, burned up and little. A TV, a table, and through the living room was the kitchen. The kitchen was burnt to a crisp. There was no way to get into the kitchen to look around, same with the back hallway leading to the bedrooms. As I walked through the living room, I sort of followed her, not really entering. This place was giving me the creeps. There were gas jugs littered all over the place, and the place just felt heavy and unwelcoming. As I was looking around, A was leaning on the couch, looking at a wallet. Suddenly I heard footsteps above us. Like I said before, there were holes in the ceiling that led to the attic. There's also no possible way to get to the attic from inside the house. Freaked out, I looked at A to see if she heard it too. She looked at me, and suddenly the footsteps were coming from all around us, above us, beside us, in front of us. We freaked and ran through the front door and ran back home. After we calmed down, we asked each other if we heard the footsteps. We were 100% positive we were alone in that house. For weeks after, I would see a dark mass in my room and out of the corner of my eye. I was having a string of bad luck. The last time I saw the mass-like being, I got into a car accident, and when I looked in my rear view mirror, I saw this black mass in my back seat. I have no idea if it was connected to the house we went into or what. But I am never going back in that house again. Something moving on its own in abandoned psych ward, seen by 2 people at same time. Although I don't believe in the paranormal, it was odd. On Long Island, there is an abandoned psych ward in Kings Park. My dad works for Long Island's power company, and explained to me why the buildings can't be removed. They are filled with asbestos, and he has been trained on asbestos removal, and due to the size and quantity of buildings, it would be extremely expensive to do. The buildings are pretty cool. They still have old furniture inside even though the place is trashed from trespassers, and apparently there are old books in the basement of one building, but it is blocked off by old desks and bed frames, and I've never gone with anyone who could help me move them. Anyway, in the attic there is a large metal wheel. I assume it was involved in operating the elevators. It is rusted and quite heavy. My ex was there with a friend, and they both saw the wheel moving on its own. The wind could not do this as the wheel is too large and heavy, and even if it were smaller, the only entrances to the outside are very small vents. Her friend freaked out and ran off. She watched it keep turning until it slowly stopped. I've seen the wheel for myself, and I did not touch it. Looking at it, I could not imagine something so heavy and rusted moving on its own. It was not impossible for someone to move with some effort, but there was no one else in the building. Only one entrance to the attic, so they would have seen someone leave. Scottish Abandoned Mental Hospital. My name is Chloe, I'm 21. I'm from Scotland. In 2018, me, my ex, and his little brother decided to explore abandoned places. We stumbled across an old abandoned mental hospital. Lennox Castle Hospital is the name. We decided to check it out, bearing in mind it's approximately 10 p.m., so it was dark. We went in having to climb rocks and stuff. When we got in, we were just wandering around, enjoying scaring each other like you do. My ex, who we will call C, went into one of the rooms. Me and his brother stood outside. We will call his brother R. Me and R were standing at the window of the room C was in when we heard keys being shaken behind us. I thought it was my keys, but then I remembered C had them in his pocket, and he was in front of us. We kept hearing movement as well, when there wasn't any wind. The next time I went up was with 4 of my friends towards the end of 2018, the middle of winter, and around 10/11 p.m., so it was pitch black.
The group consisted of myself, A, K, J, and T.
Me and T kept hearing high-pitched screams coming from above us, but no one else heard them. They thought we were joking. We also kept hearing movement in the bushes and again no wind. The walk back down was probably the most terrifying thing to ever happen to me. T told me she saw glowing red eyes in the trees. I told her it's her mind playing tricks trying to create a reason for the noises we heard. We walked further down, and I had the feeling I had to look into the trees. As I looked, I saw them. The red eyes. I tried to pass it off, telling myself that it was an animal in the trees, but Jay had the light and was way ahead of us. But not only that, the trees were far apart and on a hill. The eyes were between the trees and looked like they were floating. No one else has seen or heard anything. We had no explanation for why it was just me and T who saw them. Fast forward to tonight at 11 p.m., and me and my best friend Jed decided to check it out. We walked up but kept hearing screeching. We passed it off as being foxes. The movement started up again just as I remembered it. The screeching was the same noise I heard before, but this time Jed heard it. We got up to the hospital, and we were quite far back from it. I had my flashlight on, and I pointed it to the building. Jed stood mesmerized by it, as it's a lovely structure. I pointed my light to one of the windows, and I saw a railing. The railing looked like it had a black figure standing and holding on. I mentioned it to Jed, and all he said was no top lip. He paused. I asked him what it was, and he rushed me back to my car. When we got back to the car, he said he saw a pure black figure in the top left window, which twitched its head as if it were trying to get us to go to it. All the way back to the car, we hear footsteps and the screeching again. This place definitely has something going on, and I will not stop going there until I find out what's going on. I was the night watchman at an abandoned mental hospital turned state park for a summer in college. The only creepy thing that happened was one night I was with one of the state park police, and we saw flashlights in one of the buildings. Kids constantly broke in, and other people broke in to gut the old buildings for any copper they could find. So as I was saying, one night we saw flashlights moving around, so we went in. The officer pulled her gun and flashlight, and in we went. We could hear her footsteps on the floor above us, and we slowly and quietly went upstairs. We checked every room and found nothing. Then we heard footsteps above us again. This happened for a few floors until we were on the top floor below the roof. We heard footsteps up on the roof, so we went up there. Still nothing. We never found anyone or any indication that anyone had been there. It was friggin' creepy. When I was in high school living in Seattle, ghost hunting, visiting abandoned places, was a frequent activity for us. There is a place north of Seattle called 13 Steps to Hell. The story is that a satanic family once lived in a house where they had a cemetery deep in their backyard. These stones date back at least 100 years. The family built 13 steps into the cemetery with 2 giant pointed pillars at the top. Supposedly, each step down would give you hallucinations, you would hear and feel things, and on the final step, you would see fire, hell. The steps continue to be bulldozed because the current residents surrounding the area probably do not appreciate late-night visitors. But the steps always seem to reappear. I've seen them. Our first journey, it took us nearly 4 hours of driving and walking to find it. There are no clear directions anywhere online, at least at that time. We accidentally stumbled upon a path just as we were about to give up. It is about a mile hike deep into the woods. Along the overgrown trail, you have a lot of barriers to duck under and over, and there are random things everywhere, such as crashed cars in the middle of the woods and abandoned items as well. After 30 minutes of hiking in the creepy darkness of this overgrown forest, we were going to head back when my friend pointed to me and said, "Shit, look where you are standing." I looked down, and I was unknowingly standing between the pillars and on the first step down to the cemetery. At that point I was not going to walk down the steps, but I did explore the cemetery. My friends explored further down and started yelling and screaming. They told us to stop scaring them, even though we were at least 200 feet away from them. We left promptly after they ran up and insisted we leave. Never talked about it again. I went back 5 times after with friends who had heard, and I was the only one who knew how to get there, so I gladly took them. Nothing creepy happened on those trips. 1 year later, some friends asked me to take them. We went at midnight one evening and went there, looked around the cemetery, nothing out of the ordinary. I went down to the cemetery and rubbed one gravestone so I could read it. Some satanic symbols. We were standing in a circle debating how much longer we would stay when all of a sudden a 3-foot log came flying at us and landed in the middle of the circle. We all look around and notice that no one from the group is missing, so it wasn't any of our friends. 30 seconds later, all of this shit is flying at us. I look at them and just say, "Run." We started running back through the overgrown trail with logs, branches, rocks, etc. being thrown at us. I've never run so fast in my life. At one point, my friend looks back and sees 2 giant yellow eyes after us, and all we heard were growling noises running after us, ducking under fallen trees, running through sticker bushes, and falling several times. We run to the car, get in, and drive away as fast as possible. None of us said a word to each other for at least an hour. And I have never been back since. The abandoned house. The incident occurred in the late 1970s in Long Beach, California. I was about 7 to 8 years old and was out playing with my best friend John in the neighborhood. There was an abandoned house on the block, and we were overplaying by it as we often did. Except this afternoon it had changed. The rotten boards that had previously covered the windows were gone, replaced with clean, unbroken windows. The house had a fresh coat of paint and a new roof. As we stared at the house, we noticed to our left a tall brunette woman had opened the squeaky back door and noticed us looking at the house. She waved to us. "Boys, could you come here, please?" She beckoned. We looked at each other in absolute bewilderment because we both knew this house had been abandoned for a long time. This was very strange. We slowly approached the back door and meekly said hello to this odd woman looking at us. She seemed pleasant enough. "Would you like to try some of my cookies? I've just finished baking them," she asked, holding out a tray of fresh sugar cookies for us to sample. "Sorry, no, thank you, ma'am. We just ate," my friend explained as I tried to peer inside the dark door. I could barely make out the shape of an older gentleman slouching in a chair and a large, slender cat standing next to him, staring right at me. It was black and was over 3 feet tall sitting. Just as I was spooked by this strange sight, the cat slowly turned and walked out of the room. That was it, I wanted to leave. We stumbled backwards away from the house as the lady just smiled and waved slowly, as if in a trance. "Bye boys. Come back and see us again soon," she sung as we turned the corner and ran as fast as we could straight home. The next day, curious about what we had witnessed the previous day and wanting to investigate this strange event, we went back to the house first thing in the morning. The house was back to how it had always been, boarded up, ugly, and abandoned. As we approached, we could hear a popping sound and saw a long-haired man in faded denim shooting a BB pistol at the house and windows. In warning, we yelled, "Hey, mister. Someone lives here. Don't shoot the windows out." He stopped shooting, turned to us, and said, "Ha ha. This house has been empty for years. You gotta be kidding. No, seriously, we just saw a couple here just yesterday, you gotta believe us." I pleaded. The man wasn't convinced and looked at us as if he thought we were crazy. Then suddenly, out of the blue, he asked us if we wanted his pistol. We both vigorously nodded and watched as he threw the gun into a small patch of tall grass near the abandoned house. John and I quickly dove into the patch of grass to retrieve the gun, but it was not there. I turned around to ask the man where he threw it, but he too had vanished. We never did go near that house again, and it remained boarded up and empty. Soon after, I moved out of state, as did John. The house was torn down eventually. I have a story from about 2 years ago that really captivates me to this day. When I told this story to close friends, they told me it was straight out of a movie. I really can't disagree with that. This starts when I finished my first year of college in the Bay Area. I worked my ass off in school, and I just wanted to have a wild summer, and I would do anything I could to get out of the house. My cousin was / my best friend, and we basically did anything and everything together. When there was nothing to do, we'd take walks together around my rural neighborhood. I always lived near this old hospital, which used to operate as the biggest trauma unit in my area. Sometime when I was in high school, they shut the hospital down due to unknown reasons. It basically just sat there rotting for a few years before we found it. One day my cousin and I were drinking a cold one, taking one of our routine walks, and ventured away from our usual route through this peaceful random field. We stumbled across this huge parking lot after making it out of the field, but it didn't hit me that this was the old hospital parking lot we found. We made our way through the lot until we saw this massively grand building standing outside of the lot. The deteriorated banner said emergency room, and this is when we knew we struck gold and stumbled across a back route to this abandoned hospital. We knew of this place, but we had never been here. We hadn't heard any weird, outlandish urban legends, nor had anyone we knew been here before us. We pushed forward and checked the perimeter. To our surprise, the first door we walked up to had a rock jammed in between the door frames so we could waltz in. This is when we realized this could potentially be a bad idea if we got caught and we could suffer some consequences. We agreed we would be quiet and respectful and make it a quick trip. This is where things take a turn. Or a few turns. We enter the building, and it was the most deafening silence I have ever heard. The sound of the door closing behind us sounded like a literal bombing. Once the echo stopped from the door, it dawned on us that this place was ducking creepy. We walked slowly, but the floor is covered in glass, which makes even the smallest steps sound like Bigfoot lumbering around a library. We find a patient room, which still has a bed inside. We stop at the doorway to look inside because the floor looks sketchy. Out of nowhere, from around the corner, we hear the faintest, slow, drawn-out whistling. I've never in my life stopped what I was doing so suddenly. I just stare wide-eyed at my cousin, because even a whisper sounds like yelling in this place. We both have our feet planted to the ground, because if we move those two, we will make ourselves known. At this point, we both assumed there could potentially be a squatter or guard of some sort. My cousin hand gestures to me that we have to leave and we can't just stand here because the whistling was obviously not going to stop at that point. We turn towards the opposite side of the corner that the whistling is at and are tiptoeing out to a perfect science. Then the whistling stops. We freeze. Then we hear the glass crunching from around the corner. We start running. Once we get to the door we came from, We realize we didn't put a ducking rock in the door frame when we came in, and the door is completely stuck. As we were trying to get this door to open, the glass crunching is now running. We hear the glass crunching until it sounds like it's dangerously close. I'm freaking horrified. We turn around to try another door, and the noise of the glass is literally right in front of us, yet no one is there. No one. We book it to a door that says pharmacy and peel open the door. The pharmacy is completely empty except a single, perfectly placed and aligned, landline phone plugged into the wall. The phone is off the hook and is making a dial tone. The whole thing was perfectly ducking lined up and centered with the whole room. I've never seen anything like it. The dial tone was so loud in such an empty place. There wasn't power throughout the hospital, so how was it working? I was in shock. We left and never went back. I had heard of some other kids visiting the area at night. They told me they heard whistling and thought someone was lurking in the shadows the whole time. It's a freaky ducking world out there. When I was 13, we went into an abandoned old folks' home. Climbed in through a boarded window into a resident's bathroom, through their tiny living quarters, and out into the hall. Along the corridor, we were led to a dining hall with vaulted ceilings and a balcony from the second floor with a grand staircase that swirled up from one end of the room. All first floor windows had been boarded up, but the second story ones remained uncovered. Stale light through years of dirt, net curtains, and dank cobwebs lit the room up eerily. In the corner stood a white grand piano, broken keys, and water damaged. Every round table is covered in an old crocheted doily with 6 chairs, some scattered on the floor. We stood looking in awe and whispering, "Wonder how many old folk have died here." We tried another door, and at that point we must have set off an alarm. Like a warning siren, it split the air, amplified by the haunting, dank air. The 6 of us bolted back to the corridor, down to the residence room, and back out the window. We scrambled into the woods and around the abandoned gardens to the side of an old pond. We saw a security van coming round. At 13 with wild imaginations, it felt like the full police force was out to find us, and we decided on a plan. We'd split into 3 groups and meet back up at a swing park a mile up the road at 3, giving us 45 minutes to make an escape. As the other 2 groups scampered off, one west, one east, the other kid and I just sat down on an old bench. I was fat and soon not a runner. We waited 20 minutes, a security van stopped close by, and a guard came out asking us where we'd been. I told him I was locked out of the house and Mom wouldn't be back till 4, so we were just sitting and waiting. This seemed to be enough of an answer for him, and he drove off. We strolled off to the park and met up with the others. They knocked all those buildings down and built a new hospital in the grounds behind Larbert, Scotland. Extreme shivers and a sudden freezing cold feeling when looking at a specific window at an abandoned hotel in Newquay, England. Last year I went on a school trip to England from Norway and visited a few places and schools. It was enjoyable and all, but something happened that really struck me as odd. My friends and I walked by this hotel about 1 p.m., and I found it quite interesting. Abandoned buildings in Norway are rare, as they often get demolished pretty quickly. But suddenly, while looking at one of the windows, I got extreme shivers and got freezing cold. I almost dropped to the ground, I was so surprised. I am not superstitious at all, so I had no idea what happened. After I got calmer, I looked at the window again. And I got the same, really weird, creepy feeling when looking at it. Again, I got shivers and felt cold. My friends asked what happened, and I told them about the window. They laughed it off, and so did I, but one of the girls looked at it as well, and she almost got the same experience. She said that she really needed to leave the area immediately, she did not feel safe anymore. So we did. I went to the same place the other night, and while looking at the exact same window, I still got shivers. What could have caused this? Haunted abandoned church. This happened to me back in 2008 when I was 14, so my memory is a little fuzzy. My mom, brother, and I traveled to a remote area of Tennessee from Texas for a visit. We were only staying for the weekend. My mom, aunt, and grandmother were talking, and I don't know how we got to this conversation, but my aunt was telling me how she heard about this abandoned church that was haunted. If you went to the church and took the stick that kept the door closed and put it somewhere else, when you came back it would be in its original place. There was a statue of an angel, and if you shined a light in its eyes at night, they would bleed. She was spending the night at a friend's house, and her friend also had another friend over that she wasn't familiar with. Her 2 friends decided to go out to this church at night early in the morning. It's pitch black because it's out in the country. They lay a Ouija board on the truck and start asking questions. Basically some spirit names. John said he was murdered by a gunshot in some year in the early 1800s. I swear in this town there are more dead people than there are alive people. I don't actually know that, but it seems like it. The last question that they asked was, "Where are you?" And the thing flew off the board. They decided they didn't want to look for it. Part of me wonders if it's still at the church and where it would be, so they checked the stones and found John. Then they thought that they heard a gunshot and ran back to the truck and went home. I said that I wanted to go to the church. She took me, my brother, and my cousin, who were the same age. It took us 45 minutes to drive out there. And the road that was empty was nothing but grass. There was no way you could walk there. Across the street was a field that went on for miles, and on either side of the church was just grass and trees. No street lights. So we get there, and it's a one-room white little church. It's surrounded by some trees towards the outside of the fence. The fence was black iron, and the opening was big enough for the trucks to come through. We saw that creepy angel statue, it looked like the Reaper. And we pull up. The gate is already open, and it's only open for one person to go through the gate. Immediately, my brother and my cousin, who were in the back seat, were like, "Oh no. We're not going on there." And my aunt was like, "Why is the gate open? I just don't understand why the gate is open." And I had my hand on the handle. And I looked at the gate. And I knew something was waiting for me on the other side of that gate. I could see, maybe my mind made it up, but I didn't see it with my physical eyes, a ghostly white dude with yellow crooked teeth maliciously smiling at me, waiting for me to come in. So I took my hand off the handle and said, "Okay, I'm ready to go home." So she backed out and went down the road a little bit further, and the closest thing next to us to turn around at, because there were little ditches on the side of the road in case it rained, was another graveyard. Not surprising. I'm telling y'all, there are more dead people in this town than alive people. We passed by the church, and I wasn't expecting her to stop, but she stopped to take a photo with a digital camera. And the door was open to the church. We all freaked out. And I swear I had this feeling like we needed to leave because I felt like something was going to chase after us. When we got home, the three of us couldn't stop looking at the camera of the church. The thing I remembered the most was that the trees grew into a face. It looked like a bald man with a big crooked nose and a long, narrow chin. When my aunt got the picture developed, there were 4 orbs. 1 by the gate, 1 by the door, and 2 by the window. My brother and cousin swore they saw green eyes looking out of the window. I didn't sleep that night. I felt like something was hovering over me, waiting for me to fall asleep. I kept praying that nothing would happen. I tried watching George Lopez Shake It Off, but damn, there was no shaking it. I didn't sleep until I got back to Texas. That was my last night in TN, and when I went back home, I slept with my light on every night for a while. And while we were there, I could feel just this unbelievable amount of hate from the demons that were there. They were so aggressive and ready to attack. It just pierced through you. And I walked away knowing that there is a God, and He is good. I don't know how I knew, but you know it when you come across something so evil. No human can conjure the kind of hate that crushes your soul. That's my only experience. I will never doubt that there is a spirit world after that. My aunt sent me the picture, but I tore it up back in 2012 because I was afraid that it would bring something harmful into the house. Long abandoned diner was up and running. This happened last year, but I still can't explain it. For years, my mom and I go grocery shopping together every weekend. On our way there, we always pass a diner that has been closed down and boarded up for the last decade. It's falling apart, the grass is overrun, there is graffiti all over it, windows are broken, etc. Right when quarantine shutdowns began last year, we went a few weeks without grocery shopping because we had stocked up beforehand to last us about a month or so. When we went to go again, we passed the diner, and both of us at the same time exclaimed that it was up and running. We were at a red light and had plenty of time to really look at it. We made comments about how quickly they fixed it all up and made it look beautiful. The grass was mowed and flowers had been planted. The parking lot was filled with cars of people inside. The graffiti was all gone, the windows fixed, lights strung along the windows, and the place was gorgeous. We both talked about how quickly they must have done that over the last month and how we were glad to see it finally being put to use. 2 days later we passed the area again, and both of us were stunned when we saw it back to being in ruins, overrun, and boarded up. I googled the place, and it says it's been that way for a decade and no mention of anything opening in its place. In fact, there are plans to demolish it altogether soon. We just couldn't explain what we had both clearly seen. Growing up in a formerly abandoned house. When I was 8 years old, my family moved from my original childhood home into a 120-year-old house with a lot of history. It was a beautiful house, but there had been a big fire in it many, many years ago, and it was abandoned for 15 years. I really didn't like the house when we first moved. The energy felt off, and I felt like I was constantly being watched. There were certain rooms where the energy felt so off. I refused to go in there alone. We also ended up moving my bedroom after 1 to 2 years because I hated the energy in the room and couldn't explain it to anyone. My parents wrote these feelings off as just being a scared 8-year-old, but the feelings about specific rooms maintained until we moved out when I was 18. A lot of strange occurrences happened during the 10 years I lived in this house. So much so that in high school I started to wonder if I could be schizophrenic, even though these occurrences happened exclusively at home, and since moving I haven't experienced anything. I was constantly seeing things out of the corner of my eye or hearing footsteps when I was home alone, but I'm going to share 2 experiences that really stand out in my memory. For my 13th or 14th birthday, I had a few girlfriends sleep over in the living room. Some of them had never been to my house before, and I didn't tell them anything about it because I just wanted everyone to have a good time and not feel spooked. The next morning, one friend asked why my dad was walking in between our sleeping bags for a while last night. I immediately knew that wasn't my dad. My parents went up to bed while we were still awake, and my dad confirmed he didn't get up in the night. My friend didn't particularly want to sleep over after that first night. Another experience that I vividly remember happened when I was coming home from a party in high school. It was after midnight, but I was booking it to my bedroom, closing the door, and falling asleep with the lights and TV on. All of that being said, I believe whatever was in my house with us wasn't malicious. We took good care of the house, and I like to think that the spirits appreciated us for that. When I was younger, around 12, my family and I used to live in this nice suburb that was only a few years old. Our house was up on a hill that turned into a forest a way back. At the edge of that forest was a rundown 2-story house with no one living in it. Full of smashed windows, torn up, hole in the roof, completely unlivable. It turned into one of those haunted myths that kids in the neighborhood like to make things exciting. Most kids were told by their parents not to mess around with it since it was unsafe and falling apart, but kids will be kids. On to the story. One day some of my friends and I were bored and walking around the neighborhood but couldn't find anything to do. I was, and continue to be, a fan of exploring rundown buildings and areas, plus I am kind of a horror/ghost nut, so I suggested we go look around the house. My 2 other friends, let's call them Don and John, couldn't think of anything else to do, so we ended up going to check out the house. Now, the inside of the house is wrecked, pieces of the ceiling are gone, furniture is still just sitting around, and it really seems like the house was just straight up abandoned, which obviously fed our imaginations wildly. There was even an old rusty knife in the kitchen sink, straight out of a movie shit there. We end up looking around the first floor. Standing at the door, there is a set of stairs right in front of you to the second floor, a kitchen to the right that turns into a dining room towards the back corner. On the left was a small hallway, with a bathroom under where the stairs would be. Continue on, and there is a living/sitting room that turns into another sitting room next to the front door. Not a big house at all, but like I said, with a good bit of furniture still around, it fed the creep factor. We explored the first floor for a few minutes before meeting up by the door again, where I then suggested we go upstairs. Don and John didn't want to go up since the stairs looked to be in bad shape, so I went up on my own while they waited outside. I gingerly made my way up the stairs, making sure to test them before putting my full weight on them. At the top, there were 2 doorways, one to either side. On the left was what looked like a bedroom, so I looked inside, but it was pretty normal. Besides the wallpaper being messed up and various planks and wood being strewn about, there was nothing spectacular about the room. There was a fairly big bed, a small vanity in the corner, and a dresser. With nothing going on there, I decided to check the other room. It looked to be a bathroom, but when I looked inside, I saw a large hole in the middle of the room with part of the wall gone so you could see up the street a ways. Now, let me also preface this with, not really the king of good decisions here. I'm in an abandoned house that's falling apart on the second floor, looking for creepy stuff. The hole is also right above the kitchen, so we should have noticed anyone there. So I realize now that I should have immediately found this to be sketchy. Right next to the hole, sitting in a chair facing away from me, is a girl with longish black hair and a white nightgown, it looked like, not reacting to the noise I'm making as I'm moving around. I, with my glorious decision-making abilities, immediately go, "Oh, hi there. Are you also exploring the house?" No response. "Hello?" No response again. Are you okay?" With this, I started moving towards her with my hand out, like I'm about to tap her shoulder. Finally, maybe 2 inches away from tapping her, it hits me. The weirdness of the whole situation. Then my body immediately goes into fight or flight mode, and a voice is screaming in my head not to touch this girl. The fear I felt was incredibly intense, but I knew I couldn't take my eyes off of her. Slowly, I backed out of the room without looking away from her back. Once I was out and next to the stairs, I bounded down the stairs the way I came up and out the door as quick as I could. My friends asked me what happened, but they didn't believe me when I told them, which was honestly no surprise. I was still curious about her though, so I walked up the street to where you could see the hole in the wall but saw nothing. She wasn't there, so I was definitely creeped out. We ended up just going back home after that because there wasn't much else to do. Funny note on the stuff you remember as a kid: when I got home, I ended up getting grounded for the day because, in my infinite wisdom, I never thought that my parents would just look down the hill. My dad told me that he saw Don and John standing outside the house and was about to down and say something when he saw me run out. I was walking back to the house, so he just waited for me to get in before telling me he saw me come out of the house and that I had been told not to go in there because it was unsafe. I ended up having to stay inside the rest of the day reading. The house also ended up being demolished a year later to make room for new houses. It was a Friday after school when I and my buddies decided to explore an abandoned reform school. It was me and 4 other friends around the age of 17. This school was an all-girls school and had been shut down in 2012. The girls there were said to have been abused and hurt, at least that's what people have said. Many people have been to this place before, and we, being typical bored teens, decided to go. The place I live in is extremely boring and even more boring when you're broke. It's a challenge every weekend to plan what to do that's free and fun. I've always been fascinated by abandoned places and scary stuff. After planning the best way to approach this place, we went. We had one of our moms drop us off at this neighborhood, which led to the school. You had to walk a good way down a road that was in view of all the houses. Trying to look as not sketchy as possible, we walked. A gray Nissan had passed us and took a turn into the woods up the street. We didn't think anything of it, maybe they just parked there. It was raining and very cold, despite being the middle of April. We followed a trail that led to the main road going to the school. The main entrance was gated. Everything was going fine as we approached the first building. As we were about to walk into the first building, this car came out of nowhere, despite the fact that there is no way a car can get in. We all made a dash for the building and hid inside. Our first thought was that it was the cops, but the car was a Mini Cooper and sped off. This scared all of us, and now someone knew we were here. Instead of leaving, we decided to explore since we had already made it that far. After a few minutes, we had calmed down and started to explore the building. Everything was covered in graffiti and had been destroyed. We started walking to the second building and made it inside. We were only there for about 15 minutes when we heard a loud-ass engine that sounded like a 4-wheeler. Our first thought was great, cops on 4-wheelers. We all made a run for one of the cells and crammed all 5 of us in it. Each cell had a metal bed and a small, dirty window at the top. One of us stood on the bed looking for whoever was driving the vehicle. We had a perfect view of what was going on. There was that same gray Nissan that had passed us earlier parked outside on the road and 2 more white cars driving around. We had no idea what was going on and accepted our fate at that moment. The weird thing was that they were not cops, or at least we thought. We had no idea who these people were. The only way you could drive a car in was if you had opened the front gate, which was chained shut. The trail was up a large hill and very muddy, so there is no way a car could drive up it. We watched the other 2 white cars drive back and forth while the gray one stayed. We knew someone had seen us earlier, but the Mini Cooper was nowhere to be found. 10 minutes later, the 2 white cars parked next to the gray one, and a fat guy with blonde hair came out and yelled at the other 2 drivers, and they handed him something. We couldn't sneak out because there were a lot of us, and the only way out was in perfect view of them. Everything about the whole situation was off. They could have been looking for us or worse. They eventually left, and we still don't know what happened or what they were doing. Some of us think it was a drug deal or that they were looking for us. I wonder what would have happened if they had seen us. I love Urbanex and will continue to do it, just be careful and expect anything. Nothing makes you feel more alive than when you could possibly die. There are probably far worse experiences out there, but being fairly new to Urbanex, it really shook me up. One fall afternoon, a buddy of mine and I decided to visit a massive abandoned mental hospital to take some photos. We're talking 11 wards of 2 floors and a basement, all connected from ward to ward. In total, it must be 200 to 300 linear yards of winding, connecting hallways on each floor. You get in and see open cell after cell after cell, peeling paint and graffiti all over the walls. We checked the basement, walked through the majority of the wards, and are now at Ward 8. We got there early in the afternoon, maybe around 2 or 3 because we were too tired to go at night. Mind you, we've heard there are cult gatherings and people have been known to stumble across the occasional hobo on their visits, so we came equipped with a couple of Kershaws, praying not to get in some ducking knife fight. But, shit, it's better to have one than not, right? So, Ward 8. We're in a connecting hallway with a couple of wired off windows that can see outside, and my buddy says, "Yo, get away from the window." We look outside, and there's an ambulance, no lights on, creeping slowly around the hospital. He must have been going at about 5 miles per hour, so we thought, damn it, if there's an ambulance, there must be a cop somewhere. Bad logic, I know, but we're just worried about being busted for trespassing. The ambulance disappears from our line of sight from the windows and must have driven around all of the other wards at the same pace, because a minute or so later, we see the ambulance pass right alongside the hallway we were standing in. Still freaking creeping. Thank God, the ambulance drives away, so we think, okay, shit, that was just a scare, there's no cops around, let's just keep on going. We slowly advance for another 3 or so minutes and come across a huge lobby, probably the cafeteria, and start taking a couple shots of the collapsed ceiling. We walk a bit further into the cafeteria and are by the windows again. Then see the ambulance again. Creeping, just like last time, along the perimeter of the building. We hide from the windows, hoping that we weren't seen, as the cafeteria is full of windows to the exterior. This time, we start to shit ourselves a little bit more. He disappears from our line of view again, and of course, comes across the other side of the building, circling it just like last time, at 5 miles per hour, just like last time. This time, however, he doesn't go leave the complex, he drives up to Ward 11, the last ward, and parks in a cove with no exit that was right out of our line of sight. We hear the door open and close, and another door open and close. We were able to tell that there was only one person in the ambulance from the first time we sighted it. What the duck is going on? Was this guy here to shoot up? Seemed like a bad place for a trip. Was he here for some sort of drug deal? Or was he back to play with us because he saw us on his last ride around? We stay put, and at this point, we're maybe 50 yards from Ward 11 and 100 to 200 yards from the exit that we came in from. We know of no other exits except for the ones at each end. Trying to be as quiet as possible, we begin to hear footsteps on the floor above us. Seconds later, the footsteps turn into running. Towards us. Nope, we both instantly go for our knives and begin to book the duck out of there. The fastest 200-yard dash I will do to this day. We finally reach the exit. We're safe, god damn it, we're safe. We continue to book it a ways out of the hospital till we're on the path that gets us back to our car. On the way back to the little lot with my buddy's car, we see there's a truck, one of those Ford Ranger types, parked right next to my buddy's car. We get maybe 50 yards away from it when he turns the car on and starts driving down the road towards us. In the car is another middle-aged man who looked really sketchy. He drives past, and that's the last we saw of both of them. I never got a shot of the ambulance because I was too scared to go near the windows and that my flash would go off, but I did get a shot of the Wrangler in the parking lot. What the duck were these guys doing there? An ambulance? I'd love to hear what you guys come up with. We've been playing it over in our heads for quite a while now. Now, whether you actually believe in the paranormal or just enjoy listening to spooky stories in an attempt to scare yourself, this is one of the many paranormal experiences I've had. Arguably the most terrifying, converting one of the eyewitnesses from a skeptic to completely believing in the paranormal and actually taking it seriously. My friends and I have always been quite fond of going out urbex exploring. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's when you go out and look for abandoned and derelict buildings to explore and photograph. We didn't go out searching for the haunted side of things, we just enjoyed the eeriness and also the beauty of old, abandoned places. Living in Scotland, a lot of these abandoned places are normally surrounded by amazing scenery, from hills and mountains to thick forests and lush fields, so we always made a day out of it when we did go exploring. One house in particular was our favorite, so much so that we had already visited a couple of times prior to this experience. Myself and two of my best friends, we will call them C and B, decided to go back, but the condition of the place had declined quite rapidly since the last time we had been, and everything seemed very unstable, but we didn't let that stop us. Finding that our usual entry spot had been boarded up, we felt quite defeated but decided to look for another entry anyway. After searching around for a while, we noticed that the roof on one of the lower parts of the house had been damaged by fire and was practically all gone. It wasn't the easiest to get up to, using a tree and each other to do so, but we finally got in. It was going relatively normal. We were wandering around the inside, searching and admiring the rooms we could still get into, being terrified by the occasional bird being spooked by our footsteps, and taking photos of the amazing architecture. However, something was different this time. The whole place felt off and a little more eerie than it normally did. I've always been what you would describe as spiritually inclined, so I felt this more than what my friends did. One of them was a complete skeptic, so he just brushed it off and said we were over-exaggerating and making things up. His mind was going to be completely changed after leaving this house. After exploring the top 3 floors as much as we could, cringing at the spray paint art the vandals had left, we were on the ground floor just having a chat and discussing how much the house's condition had really declined. We were standing in one of the hallways, almost in a triangle formation. I was standing in a doorframe with my back towards the empty room with C to my left and B to my right. I was still feeling a little uneasy, but I didn't give much thought to it. As we were all conversing about the plans for the rest of the day, I felt something on my back. It felt like someone had run their hand down my back. From the base of my neck to the center of my back, I felt a firm, consistent pressure until the pressure tapered off down to the base of my back. It was over within seconds. I felt all the color drain from my face as I frantically jumped forward with a scream. B and C both looked at me in confusion and asked what happened and if I had hurt myself. In a haze of confusion and dizziness, I wasn't able to form any words, never mind describing what I had just felt. I regained my bearings and took a couple of deep breaths before trying my best to explain the sensation of being touched. B's face turned a little pale as she saw how serious I was being. However, C was a skeptic. He laughed and thought I was joking or that I had accidentally hit something without realizing or that a bug had hit me. I knew that wasn't the case because for a split second before it happened, I felt every single hair on my body stand up as a warning to what was about to happen. Being slightly freaked out, B and myself managed to convince C that it was time to leave. On top of what had just happened, it was also getting a little cold. While making our way to the same section we had entered through, I started to feel a burning sensation run down my back. Like someone had taken hot coals or a flame down my back. Starting to freak out again, I asked B to check if anything was there. Asking her what was wrong, I automatically knew something was wrong because she didn't give me a response, she was just silent. The next thing I knew, B was calling over C to come and look, which made my anxiety spike up more. From the look on C's face, I became increasingly worried. They both nervously told me that there were marks going down my back. Obviously not being able to see my back myself, I then asked them to take a photo for me to see. Looking at the photo, there were 3 distinct scratches doing down my back, exactly where I had felt someone or something touching me. At first, C was convinced I had done it myself or caught myself on something, but after examining the scratches more, he determined that it couldn't have been. The scratch went under my bra strap, which would have been impossible for me to do without them noticing. At this point, we were all trying to keep our calm while internally freaking out. We tried to make our way out as quick as we could without injuring ourselves. Climbing back over the wall of the house and through the hole where the roof used to be. We collectively walked a few feet away from the house and stopped to look back at it. Still trying to understand what had just happened, we all agreed that we'd go back to the car and never come back here. The walk back to the car, which took around 20 minutes, was relatively uneventful. Apart from a continuous, uneasy feeling that we were being watched or followed and occasionally thinking we could hear footsteps behind us, it was actually quite peaceful, taking in the Scottish countryside. We got to the car where we sat and had a smoke, still trying to completely calm ourselves down. It's safe to say that after that day, C took a long time to process the events but undoubtedly became a believer. We swore to never come back to this house. But for some reason, we're always drawn back to it. It's like an urge to come back and visit. Like an itch that you can't quite scratch. Maybe we're just drawn in by the eeriness or the mystery around that day, or maybe it's something more than that. Urbex can be unsettling. For a while, my friends and I were involved in urbex. In my background, I am a 22-year-old female empath, a trait that is inherited in my family. I'm super sensitive to all things paranormal. There's a place about an hour away that we frequented, and almost every time, I would feel this dread and sadness in one specific room of one building. The last time we went, I felt something attach itself to me. My friends C, they all wear these crystals to keep them safe and cleanse them before every excursion. At the time, I wasn't working, I couldn't afford any, so being that I'm overly sensitive, I'm an easy target. Ever since then, I never feel like I'm alone. A different time, we were in this place, high up, in the middle of nowhere in the woods. Got lost at one point. The shivers, lol. We stumbled across something. All sound was gone. No wind at all. Then a smell hit me. And let me tell you, I felt all of the energy leave my body. I knew what it was from the countless stories. The smell of copper mixed with death. The branches were breaking in the woods. The scattered faraway voices I heard all night. That wasn't a ghost. That was a skinwalker. And let me tell you, that was my final straw. I noped out of there so fast. I'm curious if anyone else has encountered similar situations. To either? It's been 20 years, I'm 34 now, and it still scares the fark out of me. To set the scene, We're a bunch of young girls in high school, year 8. Of course we all heard about Ouija boards after watching scary movies, and we all wanted to try it. One afternoon after school, but before we did the board, we went into an abandoned home in our small town. One of the girls said that a local teen had beat the older man to death that had lived there. It was creepy, and I remember feeling like we should not have been in there, but there we were. And regrettably, I think we were really rough in there too, picking random pieces of junk up and throwing it around. Just being a bunch of dumb, disrespectful teens. There wasn't any real furniture or belongings. But we were still buttholes. So we leave, and in an empty paddock just across from the creepy dead man's house, we decide it's a great spot to summon spirits. Like, what is wrong with us? I can't remember which one of us made the board, not me. We 4 sat down in a circle and did all the usual mumbo-jumbo questions. Now I wish I could remember exactly what the spirit board said. But I know I took my hand off the planchette in fear a few times, and so did the others. And of course we didn't say goodbye or anything like that. We all got freaked out by a spirit named Bob, and that was that. Time went on, and I no longer talked to those childhood friends, not to do with this spooky shit, so I can't find out again exactly what they experienced. But I'm also still freaked out about the shit that started going down and wouldn't know how to even start the conversation. Over the next few weeks or so, at least 2 of my friends said they had really messed up dreams. I then started being woken up at 3 a.m. every night. Bang on 3, I would just wake up and feel creeped out and look over at the digital clock to see what time it was. I was so scared that I was sleeping with the lights on, but it would still happen. I had started having general anxiety and bad panic attacks, but I didn't know what was happening. I thought I was going mental but kept it to myself. As it so happens, while all this negative shit was happening, my parents had recently split, and I was in the process of moving interstate with just my mom. My friends had thrown me a going away party and invited half the school year. I remember not having a good time at all during the party because of my anxiety, but everyone else was running wild and having a good time. Pretty late that night, a small group of people came back after going for a walk, and they had tried ducking around with the spirits again. One of my yearmates, a guy, was so distressed, and he kept saying he saw in a vision his family die. So what do a bunch of 14-year-olds drinking and partying do? Ignore it and carry on. I, for one, did not want any part of that. A few weeks later, and it's moving time for myself and my mom. All my furniture was packed up, but because my dad was staying in the house, I just slept on the couch in the lounge room. The weird 3 a.m. wakings up had been still happening, but not every night. But this last night in the family home was terrifying. I went to sleep on the couch, and it was pitch black in the lounge room. I was dreaming a bunch of nonsense as usual, Pisces dreamers, you get it, lol. In the dream, I was in our backyard near the clothesline. I remember seeing some friends and family members, and then all of a sudden they all dropped to the ground like they died. I then heard my name being called clear as FKN day, but it was some weird twisted voice. I woke up in the dead of night, and it was darkness all around. I looked around the darkness, and then I looked down to the foot of the couch. There was a dark and big manly figure standing looking over me. I distinctly remember knowing someone was there, and I weakly called out, "Dad?" No answer. At this point I tried to look for some eyes or a face. All I could see were red eyes. And I know they were a faded color, but red-colored eyes were definitely there, staring at me. Think of any time you've woken up in the dark and tried to find whoever was disturbing you. You can see them and know they're there, but not super clearly. Whatever, or whoever, was there was a bad presence. Well then, I think I did what any other kid would do and put the blankets over my head and tried to breathe quietly. I was wishing whatever it was would go away and everything would be okay. I couldn't tell you how long I was under the covers and trying to breathe from a tiny part I made in the covers. But I somehow fell asleep for a tiny bit when the sun started to rise again until my mom woke me up. Of course I didn't tell my mom or anyone what had happened. It was such a surreal thing to experience as a 14-year-old going through all the other hormonal and high school bullshit. I moved to the other state, tried to integrate into school, and put it all in the back of my mind. But I just knew that bad juju was going to stay back at the old family house, now my dad's place. Over the next year and a half, a lot of changes happened with family, and I did end up living back at the house. Studying a diploma in music I could only do in Sydney, there was only one more incident, not long after I moved back, but holy crap, it was scary. I was home alone and I was sitting at the computer desk. It was situated behind a wall, and if you looked through the doorway just to the right of the desk, you could see the kitchen and the small living area. I was talking about it on Messenger and then felt a sudden shot of unease come over me. Then I heard a loud bang like someone had slammed the oven door shut, but it was so loud and even the lights flickered. It was just the yuckiest, scary feeling. I jumped up and looked in the kitchen and couldn't see anything. Thank duck, lol. I then ran out the back door and grabbed the cordless landline on my way out and called my dad. I would have sounded mad to him, but all I could say was something was weird in the house, and please come home soon. I don't remember what happened ghost-wise moving forward after that. I guess I suppressed a bit and then got busy with life. I do know that I used to sneak into pubs with my TAF friends and come home pretty pissed. That obviously helped. Then he grew up and moved out. But those memories I still have are so freaky. In the end, don't duck with Ouija boards when you're a dumb teen. Or, ever. Ouija board in abandoned house. Whenever my friends and I visit this abandoned mansion, we find a shrine dedicated to a deceased individual, complete with his obituary, shoes, and notes from his mother stored in a large urn. So my friends FaceTimed me and told me that yes, we're going to the mansion with the board, with him, and with 3 of my other friends. When we got there, I had the idea to do the board in that room with the shrine. I doubted the board working, even though I've always had bad experiences with these boards, homemade or original. Eventually the board said goo twice, so when we were done we went to the basement, where we found a story about a bare-headed man, and in the story, don't remember what it said before goo, it said something and then said goo, so we knew to get the hell out of there. Also, when I went on Wikipedia for goo, one of the definitions said a spirit whose head was severed and put on a stake. I told my mom about it, and she told me to never do it again, and why the hell would I do it considering what happened in the past? I don't know, we all thought it was pretty creepy, it even scared my mom. I'm honestly just really scared. I feel like puking and don't feel right at the moment. I'm going to try and get to sleep soon. Please comment. Me and my friends, after working the close shift at Mickey's, used to drive over and go wandering around the grounds of an old hospital that used to house mentally ill patients a long time ago. It was called Whittingham. So this place was massive, and in the 60s it had gone through loads of controversy about ill-treating patients, medical testing, basically all the bad shit, and between our friendship group, these had turned into rumors and stories of haunted buildings and the like. They had built a new hospital next door, but the grounds to this place were huge, abandoned, and barely even guarded. This was around 1999 to 2001. Anyway, we used to drive over, park up, and climb the fence. Each time we would try and discover a new building or area. Quite often the floors would give way, or we would have to jump across big holes in the buildings. It was pretty dangerous. But there were wards, huge halls, massive old Victorian buildings with towers, an old church, just an amazing place to explore and scare the shit out of each other. Think creepiest place you can imagine, and you're probably on the right track. Like literally something out of a horror movie set. I remember one time, we were walking across an old theater room, and a friend actually fell through the floor to the basement. He hurt himself pretty badly, but trying to get him out or find him was the worst. I have a million funny stories about this place, but there are 2 terrifying times that will stick in my mind forever. We were exploring one of the bigger, older Victorian-style buildings, and I had lost rock, paper and scissors to climb through the window and try to open the door from the inside. I will never forget that as I was shitting myself. I got the door open, and we all went in. It was a huge mansion-like building with those stairs that are split at the bottom and curve round to join together at the top. Torches on, and in pretty much pitch blackness, we went up them and right along this corridor. Turns out this was a building of small wards. We walked into one, and it was like a loop back round to the main corridor again. So we wandered down it, and all the beds were just metal frames with nothing else. As we turned the corner, there was one bed, however, that had a mattress on it, and it was just stained with blood. Like a big patch. It was gross. We were messing about shitting each other up as we got back to the main corridor. One of my friends freaked out. He was pointing at the steps, and there were drops of blood leading from the ward we had just been on back downstairs. I would say that's the most scared I've ever been, and when you're already a bit panicky and you see this, we absolutely bolted. I don't think we went back for a while after that one. The other time I won't ever forget is when we couldn't get into this one building, so we found a basement door around the back, you know those creepy thin stone steps that lead underground with a wooden door at the bottom. We pushed our way in and were in some kind of underground corridor. It had all of the pipes on the ceiling running the length of it. I'm a big lad, and I was stooping a bit to get through this, so you can imagine how it felt, tight, low ceiling, and pitch black. We dared each other to go first, and luckily I was right in the middle this time. Safest place. Anyway, this corridor went on forever. We were obviously in the underground network of utility tunnels that join the buildings. There were a couple of staircases leading off every now and then, but most were blocked off, so we just kept going. After a good few minutes of walking, we came to the end, where there was one metal door. It was one of those classic hospital/jail doors you see in films with the little window hatch at eye level. We pushed this open, quite literally scared as babies, and inside the room was empty except for one thing. There was a single metal chair in the middle of the room fastened down to the floor, and above it hanging down from the ceiling were two metal chains with those wrist wrap/tie things on the end. It may be the single worst thing I've ever seen. We all knew what it was and what had probably happened there. But to see it firsthand in this hidden underground room at the end of the shitty corridor. It will never leave me, that image. The stories of abuse at this hospital are widely known. But this was too much. Lechworth Village story. Lechworth Village is an abandoned mental institution that's a pretty close drive from where I live. There was a guy in my group of friends who was obsessed with the place. He would drive up by himself, constantly pester us all to go up there, talk about it regularly, etc. I'd done my fair share of exploring abandoned areas when I was much younger, and at this time, I was about 22, I was over it. I'm just too cool for school, you see. The guy eventually convinced 3 friends, myself and the guy I was dating at the time, to come drive up there and check the place out. It was a crummy, abandoned mental institution. Surprise! He kept warning us that we were trespassing and to look out for any of the security guards that patrolled the grounds in their pickup trucks. It was dusk as we wandered around, but nothing about the place creeped me out. I sat on some swings that looked like they were going to collapse at any moment and chatted with one of my friends, who then proceeded to tell me that Lechworth is supposedly haunted and that people regularly see orbs and apparitions during their visits. I rolled my eyes. Every abandoned mental institution is supposedly haunted, it's just something people say to spook themselves out as they trespass and drink beers in dilapidated buildings, as bored teenagers are wont to do. Obviously, I'm very interested in the paranormal and have been for a very long time, but I just found the whole spooky haunted decrepit abandoned mental asylum thing to be too cliché. We walked around, chatting, joking, what have you. I had to admit the grounds were very interesting, we even found the remnants of the institution's old graveyard. When we came upon a building, everyone else was amped to go inside and explore. I was not. There was debris everywhere, and it was dark at this point. I have a terrible sense of balance and horrifically bad night vision. I knew going in there was going to be a difficult time. My boyfriend at the time began to taunt me, asking, "Are you afraid of ghosts? Huh? Get in the goddamn car scared of seeing a ghost, you guys." And I was like, no, I just know I'm going to trip in the dark and impale myself on a piece of rebar or something, so shut the duck up. Plus, I'm 1,000 times more afraid of running into a homeless man on meth who is squatting in there who will then freak the duck out because we just invaded his home than the idea of running into a ghost.
The rest of the group was pretty much like, fine, then stay out here, when the guy who'd invited us up there in the first place hissed, "OSHT, I just saw headlights."
It's the security guards. Run, hide. I look, and, lo and behold, I can see through the trees that there are 2 circular lights getting closer. We all bolt and end up crouched down in some brush. Where are the lights? We think the truck must have taken a turn down the dirt road away from us, and we relax. Nope, there the lights are again, but this time from a completely different direction. The duck? Maybe there are 2 security trucks driving around. That sucks. We scurry through the brush, trying to keep it low and somehow quiet despite all the noise we make crunching on leaves and the tall, dry grass. The lights had been much closer that time, it seemed like pure luck they hadn't seen us. It was also weird they hadn't caught us yet. The group stops, all crouched down, as we look around to catch sight of the headlights that really should have still been visible. No headlights. We decided to make a run for it back to the car even though we're afraid we're going to see 2 security guards sternly standing by the vehicle, ready to write us up for trespassing. Thank God, we don't see or pass a single security truck the whole way back to the car, and there are no stern security guards to meet us back at the parking spot. We all hop in the car and drive as quickly as we could out of Lechworth Village. It wasn't until we'd been on the road for about 15 minutes when one of my friends says, "Did anybody actually hear the sound of the truck's engines?" The inside of the car is dead silent as we exchange looks, and we all admit, no, we never heard the sound of tires or engines whenever we'd seen the lights. This was incredibly strange since the second time we'd seen them, they had been rather close. Definitely close enough to hear pickup truck sounds. I'm pretty sure we all just laughed it off as our nerves got the better of us and changed the topic. I'm not dating that guy anymore, he's a shitbag, and I've fallen out of touch with the people I'd gone with to Lechworth Village, but I wish I could ask them if they think maybe we mistook those notorious orbs that are known to be seen at night floating about the grounds for normal headlights. Years later, I find out Ghost Adventures visited Lechworth Village and investigated the site. I've still never seen it, the place just creeps me out now. Some old abandoned houses. I am a 15-year-old male, accompanied by my 17-year-old female friend. We're walking back from dropping one of our other friends home and taking a usually normal and quiet one-street way home.
A friend talks about houses and stuff, houses she wants to move into and such.
Now we pass back on the right side of the street, where an old, black, wooden, small abandoned house is. My parents and her parents say, with a bunch of neighbors as well, that it's been abandoned for years now. I'll be real. I don't give in to paranormal shit at all, and the more I read this and think about it, I still find it so stupid. But we approach the house, and, friend talks about how it could be renovated. I get a weird feeling in my stomach to not go closer or stay longer, but she persists. We talk about how it could be renovated a bit more and get closer, remarking about the windows and the dust with drawings on it. I might be tripping myself, but again, like I said, this is so stupid, but I'm overthinking afterwards. I swear I saw movement in the windows but only remember it now, and as we got closer, she kept talking about it, and then we heard like a metal sound. We hastily returned home due to the proximity of the event. Keeps saying it's a mouse, but I generally think it was something else like the door opening, but again, the house has been abandoned for years. First, I want to say, because again, I don't believe in anything paranormal, but I really think it sounded like someone picking up or opening a metal lock or something. We're considering going back to record at this time. I think it's kind of stupid, but it can prove nothing's wrong, but I'll leave the decision to you guys. Tell us what else you guys think. I traveled in Canada 1 year ago in the summer and had a moderately unsettling experience on our first day in Vancouver. It's me and my mate alone in a brand new city after an overnight bus ride from Banff. My phone was dead after not having charged all night, and my buddy's cell phone is at 2%. It's around 5 p.m. We're worn out after exploring all day and decide to head back to the hostel while we still have access to GPS. We come to an intersection. The GPS becomes unreliable, but it clearly indicates that we should turn right. We head right. After 2 blocks out, we start to notice a lot of people on the streets behaving like homeless people, but they were acting especially strange. I start feeling nervous, and I can tell my friend does too because we both shut up and pay close attention to our surroundings. At this point, I notice an elderly lady walking down the middle of the street further up from us and heading in the same direction as us. She's using a walker, and she's wearing a blue and white striped bathrobe, slippers, and some pajama pants. As soon as I enter the peripherals, she snarls over at me and shocks the hell out of me. Alarms are going off in my head now. The streets start getting more densely packed with people that are talking, but they're making no sense. I also notice multiple patrol vehicles perched up on every intersection and driving around very slowly. There are no other cars on these roads. It's been about 4 blocks now, and I decide we took a wrong turn and demand he pull up GPS to confirm. We had, and right as his phone pulls this up, it dies. We turn around and book it the duck out of this strange part of town, and it's a 15-minute long, quiet, straight shot back to our hostel. We're finally back in our room, taking a stiff shot of rum and knocking out in our room to process things. After waking, we head down to the bar downstairs, where the hostel lobby is. I ask the locals that work there if they know about any bad parts of town. They tell me that outside the city, a mental institution lost funding and had to shut down. I don't know if they relocated any of the patients or none of them, but a lot of them flocked to the city to survive. The cops kept a close eye on them, and for the most part, they didn't bother anyone. But holy hell, me and my friend sure explored our way into a pretty creepy nightmare. I feel terrible for the condition they're forced to live in and don't know if they've made any progress in remedying this issue. When I was around 17, myself and 2 friends, let's call them A and B, went into an abandoned/condemned mental asylum. We happened to walk past it and noticed a side door was open, so we took the opportunity to explore. It was just a 2-story wing of the building but was pretty impressive, lots of trash, old chairs and paperwork, pink painted walls, and lots of cells along one side of the building. Anyway, I decided to walk into a cell, and B thought it would be funny to slam the door shut, locking A inside. We couldn't open it, it had no handle on the door and was nearly 10 centimeters thick. There was no window or one of those little sliding flaps, just a few tiny air holes arranged in a circle that we could talk through. Obviously, A is freaking out, swearing at us, kicking at the inside of the door, and screaming to get him out. B starts crying and just shuts down. I told him to leave and try and find some help, as he was having a breakdown, which caused A to start crying too. For about an hour I tried everything to get the door open, found metal bars lying around, and tried to pry the door, but it didn't move. There was nothing raised on the door to grab hold of, and there was nothing I could do to shift it. I mean, it's a cell door, this thing isn't intended to be forced open. I eventually realized no one else had turned up. B must have just gone home and not told anyone. I had to keep telling A that I needed to get help, but he refused to stay there alone and made me promise to try again to break into the cell and not leave. I knew this door wasn't coming open. I just made noise banging on the door with the metal bars and made it seem like I was getting somewhere. I smashed out pieces of the wall near the door frame and broke a bit of it, but it was useless. Honestly, I had given up and was waiting for someone to arrive, like firefighters or something. A was going crazy. He had stopped sounding scared and sad and was extremely enraged. He was screaming, and it was so loud it hurt my ears. I was getting pissed off at him and was tired of trying to break down this door. I gave up and just sat down. A burned himself out pretty quickly with the screaming. I can't remember how long we waited for, but eventually, I hear a voice yell out from the end of the building. "You've just been caught breaking and entering." A security guard was standing at the entrance of the large cell room. Seeing that guy was a bolt of energy for me, I started yelling, "My friend is stuck in there. And help me open the door." But he seemed nervous to enter the cell's room. He wanted me to come over to him. I wasn't walking over to him, and I continued to yell at him that he has to help. He tiptoes over to me and the cell door. Tiptoes like the floor is lava. I thought that was bizarre. Anyway, the guard seemed like he wanted to be a duck about it. Saying things like, "We will have to wait till the police and owners arrive before we get you out." I gave him hell, and the security guard came up with a plan to check all the other cells in the building for any key or handle that's inserted to open the doors. The guard found one. It was in a cell in another story with basically looked like a massive iron key with a square socket on one end. It plugged into a small square hole near the door frame, and the door popped open. The story, after all, goes like this. Police and owners wanted charges laid for trespassing and damage to property. I wrote a huge letter to the owners saying the door was open and how negligent it was allowing children to access a condemned building with no signage or security. Also mentioned was how traumatic the event was for us as children and for one of us to be locked in a cell. It was bullshitting, sucking up, etc. All charges eventually dropped because I think they were scared for the negligence and endangering children part. The security guard told me that under the cell's room was the old steam laundry for the asylum, and the floor we were standing on was rotted. That's why he didn't want to walk into the room. I got a huge rep at school like he was some ducking badass, but he never said thank you to me for writing the letter, getting the charges to drop, or for sticking by him and trying to get him out. B did just run home and cry. No one ever knew he was there. The creepiest part of all? After we had opened the cell, the inside of the door had scratch marks on it. They were about head high and looked like they were caused by human nails. I never worked out if they were from the patients when the asylum was in use or from A going crazy in that cell. Strange things are happening after I went to an abandoned asylum. A lived with his girlfriend's older brother, who had issues of his own, both drug-related and just general anger issues. A notable moment that they mentioned to me as they were taking me to their apartment was that one of the times the three of them went there together, her brother acted very strangely. He sat in one of the chairs that was left behind, his eyes rolled back into his head, and he was knocking glass out with his elbows and getting deep cuts but didn't seem fazed. His anger also apparently peaked, and he was threatening to cut Z and his girlfriend if they didn't leave. As they left, they saw shadows moving everywhere, and her brother was talking to himself. Over the passing days, her brother would talk about demons and would yell about wanting to go back there. He broke into the room Z and his girlfriend slept in when it was locked. He was dragging a knife along the walls, growling, and would scream about these demons. When Z was telling me this, I could tell he was being serious. He looked scared to even tell the story. When they went back, her brother was screaming, sat back in the chair, and muttered to himself, and after that everything went back to normal. He stopped talking about the demons, they stopped seeing shadow people, and the bizarre behavior stopped. This could have been tied to the drugs he was on, but they felt the need to say this because they were also seeing the shadows, and they were not high. When we got to their apartment, other friends of theirs were there, as well as her brother. I didn't recognize any of them, so I sat and made small talk with all of them, and the atmosphere was genuinely calm aside from the blasting rock music and a couple guys playing GTA 5 on high volume. A little while after I get there and we're all talking, one of the boys asks when we're going to go to the asylum. Her brother, who I guess we'll call M for now on, said we were leaving around 11 p.m. since it was an hour-long drive to get there. We had a few hours of time to kill, so someone came and brought us McDonald's, and we talked and stuff until we had to leave in 2 cars due to us having a group of 9 people total. Z drove the car I was in, and his girlfriend, C, drove in the car ahead of us. The atmosphere got tense quickly because only about 10 minutes into our drive on the highway, C almost got into an accident. We watched her speed up to pass a semi, and she had hit a bunch of cones, and we couldn't find their car. which had 5 total people in it, for another 20 minutes, which was strange because there were hardly any cars on the road at this time of night and the car was easy to identify from the back lights alone. Eventually we park across the street from this large field where the asylum would be. C told us that because of the semi, it was either speed up or slow down real quick, so she sped up. She was in an anxious mood after that. We walked through this large field for 10 minutes, Z explaining that there are multiple buildings, but one of them got demolished and a couple others had asbestos, so there were only a couple safe to go in. He also told us it was closed down in 2003 because the patients were being mistreated or something like that. I don't remember everything that happened because my adrenaline was so high. We get to a building that almost looks like the outside was for transport vehicles. C refused to go in because she was anxious, so she stayed outside with Z. It ended up being me and a group of people I didn't really know just exploring this building. The graffiti eased my anxiety a bit, but it was still eerie as we explored. Water was everywhere, from leaks to broken glass all over. Computers were broken, we found clothes in old lockers, and we even found a pile of what looked like animal bones. I was partially scared because of the atmosphere, but also because I've heard of the things that M did there. After about 30 or so minutes, we left, and Z and C were not there. We had called their phones, screamed their names, looked all around this huge field, and we couldn't find them. About 15 minutes into our search, we heard the most terrifying scream ever. I can't even properly describe it, but it was something I've never heard before in my entire life. It sounded like whoever screamed must have been in pain. It was loud, and it echoed, and we all just ran trying to find out who it came from. We were scared it came from C. At this point, it's past 1 a.m. We're scared, they're not answering their phones, and we were afraid we would have to call 911. Then we heard someone from our group say that they found them. We ran, and they looked confused. We were all trying to explain that we were yelling for them and calling them, but they didn't hear us, and their phones didn't ring. We also told them about the scream, but they didn't hear that either. They told us that they were just in another building and were looking for us too. I spent the car ride on the way back to the apartment trying to explain the scream to him because he was acting like he thought we were joking. I think he believes now, though, because now it was just us talking about it, not a bunch of people at once. The next day, I'm back at my own home, and things are pretty back to normal. The only bruise I had was from Z's teething puppy. Over the next few days, more and more bruises were appearing everywhere on my body, the oddest one being in the shape of a V on my forearm. I have never had that happen before, especially because it was so large it nearly wrapped around my arm and it was a perfect V. The other bruises were just all over my legs and arms and are still appearing to this day. Last week, as I was settling to go to bed, I was cuddling Boots and watching TV when I heard what sounded like a cat screaming from upstairs. I was on the couch downstairs. It was around 1 a.m., and it scared me even more because Boots was next to me and also turned his head in the direction of the sound. Our dog is a Husky and German Shepherd mix and couldn't make that noise either. The next day I talked to my mom about it, and she told me she didn't hear anything. A couple days later, my mom and I were in the living room with the cat and dog when we heard the stairs creak. They creak whenever someone is on them, but you can tell who is on them by how loud they are, if that makes sense. We look in that direction because it sounded like a cat was coming down the stairs, but nothing was there. Boots was right next to me, and Kiefer was on the couch. My sisters weren't home either. My mom told me I should take comfort in the fact that it's probably Princess trying to let us know she was here with us, but ever since I went to the asylum, I've been a little freaked out. I just wanted to get my story out and maybe get some feedback on the situation. I'm sorry this story is crazy long, but if you've listened this far, thank you. Around 2 years ago, my cousin from Idaho came down for a visit. I was just out of school, so we had lots of time together to catch up. Most of the time it was your usual, stay up all night being stupid, sneak off and get some food at 4 a.m., just stuff like that. I've always been into the paranormal and had just introduced him to it. He wanted to go have fun and do stuff like urban exploration. Naturally, we set out to look for a place to go. We found the Byron Hot Springs Hotel. This place was popping in the late 1800s and early 1900s with guests such as Charlie Chaplin, Fatty Arbuckle, and Joe DiMaggio. Exactly 2 fires in its existence as a hotel, the third time they thought they'd go big or go home. So they finally made it out of brick. By the 40s it was called Camp Tracy. The army had shut it down and used it as a base of operations during World War II, interrogating any enemies in the now empty abandoned hotel. There it sits, rotting away ever since. No one has done anything else to this place, and it shows. We decided we'd go around 2 a.m. to make sure no one would be awake to try and scare us off or try to shoot us, because of the no trespassing signs. We got all prepped up and bought headlamps and gloves. My uncle had joined us for the ride and decided to come with us. We ran into a few younger Middle Eastern kids who were also wanting to go in. Naturally, we teamed up and headed inside. But these kids weren't our typical crowd. They were the normal YouTube type of personality. We come up to a bend in the mile-and-a-half walk to the hotel from the road. My uncle pulls out his military-grade flashlight to see if anyone is ahead, and we see glowing eyes. They weren't just one color either. If it glows back in a white or green color, it's an animal. But this varied color pretty much every second. We see it blink, and we all stopped frozen in our tracks. This thing was a good 200 to 300 yards away. That's when it turned its head, the eyes disappeared. We turned the flashlight off and got into the brush on the side of the dirt road. I waited a good 5 minutes and went back to the spot. Turned the flashlight on, and it was already staring back at us. But this time it stood up. That's when it seemed unreal. From where we were standing, it had to have been a good 9 feet tall. We got pretty spooked, so we decided to make a beeline back to the cars. The Indian kids decided this isn't the life for them, so they left. We went back to see what it was. We got back to the area we had seen it. No footprints, no tracks, nothing. So we decided to keep going. We passed a few palm trees that had pentagrams telling us to turn back. The usual childish stuff you see anywhere that isn't inhabited every day. We walked up to the hotel, and it was massive, 4 stories tall with no windows anywhere. Just wind whistling through the empty walls. It was a surreal sight to behold. We go around the side to go into the lower level. We figured it would be safer for the time being before we can be sure we are alone. There was an empty elevator shaft that drew all of our attention. We went over and looked over, and before we knew it, there was dirt dropping on our heads as if someone swept it from the ground on purpose. When that happened, we all got startled. Anticipated someone dropping down the elevator shaft. But that was nothing close to what happened. We heard the sound of running footsteps above us and with us in the same room. They were surrounding us. It was claustrophobic. I felt like the walls were just closing in on you. It all stopped, and we calmed down. It was quiet for a few minutes, till we decided to keep going. We were about to head upstairs and check the sights out. Whoever or whatever it was didn't like that one bit. We heard the sound of someone running through the trash of empty beer cans and glass on the ground. Straight for us. We decided to leave after concluding that enough was enough. As we left, we saw a drawing on the floor. We realized there was a pentagram on the floor, by the elevator shaft, where we had backed up into when we heard the running footsteps the first time. We didn't think twice about leaving. We darted out of there as fast as we could. It felt like another 3 miles before we made it to the car. As we got into the car, it felt as if we were getting clouded over with this darkness and sorrow. The claustrophobic feeling had come back. As we left, the feeling had left. 2 years later, I'm planning on going back. With the original gang together and ready.